What happens when a luxury cruise through the Black Sea becomes your worst nightmare? Welcome to Mr. Nightveil, where tonight I'm sharing 10 true horror stories from cruise passengers and crew who survived experiences they'll never forget. For privacy, names and specific details have been altered. But these stories are 100% real, and they'll leave you questioning whether you'd ever step foot on a cruise ship again. From vanishing passengers to deadly outbreaks, each account is more terrifying than the last. Have you ever been on a cruise? What's your scariest travel experience? Drop your location and current time in the comments below. And if you're ready for stories that will haunt you, hit that subscribe button and let's dive into the darkness together. My name is Alexei, and on March 15th, 2024, I watched a woman vanish from Deck 7 of the MS Crimson Wave. And the crew acted like she never existed. I'm a marine biologist from Sevastopol, and I've spent the last decade studying Black Sea ecosystems. I've seen things in the depths that most people couldn't imagine, but nothing prepared me for what happened on that cruise. Nothing prepared me for her. I boarded the MS Crimson Wave in Constanza on a cold Tuesday morning. The ship was magnificent, one of those luxury liners that made you forget you were on the water. I wasn't there for leisure, though. I'd been documenting marine life migration patterns along the Black Sea coast for months, and this cruise would take me through key observation points. Solo travel had become my norm over the years. It was easier to focus on work without distractions, without small talk, without the weight of other people's expectations. The first day was unremarkable. I spent most of it on the upper decks with my equipment, taking water samples and making notes. The sea was calm, almost unnaturally so for mid-March. Other passengers kept to themselves mostly, couples enjoying romantic getaways, families beginning their spring vacations. I preferred it that way. But that evening, during the welcome dinner, everything changed. She sat alone at a table near the windows, sketching something in a worn leather journal. Her fingers moved with practiced precision, dark hair falling across her face as she worked. I normally wouldn't approach strangers, but something about her intensity drew me in. Maybe it was the way she seemed completely absorbed in her own world, oblivious to the chatter and clinking glasses around her. Maybe it was loneliness I didn't want to admit I felt. "That's beautiful," I said, gesturing to her sketch. She looked up, and I saw she'd been drawing the coastline, the exact angles and shadows of Constanza's harbor as we'd pulled away. "Are you an artist?" She smiled, and it was warm despite the sadness in her eyes. "Elena," she said simply. "And yes, I suppose I am. Or I was. I'm trying to remember how to be one again." Her accent was Romanian, soft and melodic. We talked for hours that night. She told me she was traveling alone, trying to find inspiration after years of creative block. She'd grown up in Bucharest, but always felt drawn to the sea. She was staying in cabin 7042, a mid-level suite on Deck 7. We made plans to meet for breakfast the next morning. The second day, Elena and I explored the ship together. She sketched while I took my samples and measurements. We discovered we had the same dark sense of humor, the same appreciation for solitude punctuated by meaningful connection. She showed me drawings of creatures that seemed to swim between reality and imagination. Fish with too many eyes, waves that formed faces, ships that looked alive. "The Black Sea has always felt haunted to me," she said, "like it remembers everything that's ever sunk beneath it." That evening, we had dinner with another couple, the Dimitrovs, a retired pair from Bulgaria. They laughed at Elena's stories about disastrous art school critiques. The husband recommended she visit a gallery in Varna when we docked there. His wife complimented Elena's necklace, a silver pendant shaped like an anchor. It was real. All of it was real. I have to keep reminding myself of that. But here's what still makes my hands shake when I think about it. The storm started on the third night, and that's when she disappeared from my life and from reality itself. The weather had turned violent around 11 p.m. Wind howled across the decks, and rain lashed the windows with brutal force. Most passengers had retreated to their cabins or to the interior lounges. I was in my room reviewing footage from my underwater cameras when I remembered I'd left one of my equipment cases on Deck 5. I cursed myself for the carelessness and headed out to retrieve it before the storm damaged it. The ship lurched beneath my feet as I made my way through the corridors. Emergency lighting flickered. The few crew members I passed were securing loose items and directing the last stragglers inside. I grabbed my case and was heading back when I decided to check on Elena. Something told me she might be out there sketching the storm. She'd mentioned wanting to capture the sea's fury on paper. I took the stairs to Deck 7. The wind nearly knocked me over when I pushed through the door. Rain soaked through my jacket in seconds. And there she was, standing near the railing about 30 meters away, her hair whipping wildly around her face. She wasn't sketching. She was just standing there, staring out at the violent black waves. "Elena!" I shouted, but the wind tore my voice away. I started toward her, fighting against the gale. She turned then, looked directly at me, and smiled. Not her usual warm smile. This was different. Peaceful. Final. She raised one hand in a slow wave, the kind you give someone when you're saying goodbye forever. Then she walked to the railing, not rushed, not stumbling. Deliberately, calmly. She placed both hands on the wet metal, and in one fluid motion, she was gone. Over the side. Into the churning darkness below. I screamed. I ran to where she'd been, looked over the railing into the foam and fury. Nothing. Just angry water and night. I sprinted back inside, found the nearest crew member, a young woman in ship's uniform checking cabin doors. "Someone went overboard," I shouted. "Deck 7, starboard side. A woman, she just jumped. We need to stop the ship, we need to—" The crew member's eyes widened. She grabbed her radio immediately, called it in with professional efficiency. Within minutes, the ship's alarm system activated. Captain's voice over the intercom. "This is not a drill. Man overboard protocol. All passengers remain in cabins." The ship began its turn, spotlights sweeping the water. I was taken to the security office, wrapped in a blanket, shaking from cold and shock. That's when everything became a nightmare that made the storm outside seem tame. The head of security, a stern Greek man named Stavros, asked me to describe what I'd seen. I told him everything. Elena, Deck 7, her jumping. He typed notes into his computer, then frowned. What was the passenger's full name? "Elena. I don't know her surname. She's in cabin 7042. He typed more, then looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. "Sir, cabin 7042 is occupied by Marius and Ioana Georgescu. They're both in their 70s. They've been in that cabin since embarkation in Constanza." "No," I said. "That's Elena's cabin. Check again. Check your manifest." He turned his monitor toward me, showed me the passenger list. No Elena. No one matching her description traveling alone. No Romanian woman in her 30s. "Perhaps you saw her but didn't get her cabin number correct?" he suggested. I spent the next hour going through the entire manifest with him, looking at every female passenger photo on file. She wasn't there. The search and rescue operation continued for 3 hours. They found nothing. No body, no debris. No evidence anyone had gone into the water. The next morning, desperate and exhausted, I found the Dimitrovs at breakfast. The woman we had dinner with 2 nights ago, I said. Elena, the artist. Do you remember her? They looked at me with polite confusion. The wife spoke gently, like addressing someone fragile. We had dinner with you, dear. Just the 3 of us. You sat alone at our table. We felt sorry for you eating by yourself. No, I insisted. She was there. She showed you her sketches. Your husband recommended a gallery in Varna. The husband shook his head slowly. I think perhaps you're not sleeping well. The sea can play tricks on tired minds. I asked other passengers I'd seen Elena interact with. The bartender she'd chatted with. The elderly man she'd helped with directions. None of them remembered her. Not one. Some looked at me with pity, others with suspicion. By the afternoon, I was being avoided. The crazy man who'd caused a full emergency response over a hallucination. I tore apart my cabin looking for proof. And then I found it, tucked between the pages of my research notes, a sketch she'd given me on that second day. A drawing of a jellyfish with my handwriting underneath. Rhizostoma pulmo, March 16th, from Elena. Her signature in the corner. Proof. Physical, tangible proof. I took it to security. Stavros examined it carefully, then asked if he could keep it to investigate. I refused. It was the only evidence I had that I wasn't insane. He made copies, ran them through some kind of analysis I didn't understand. Then he asked me to come to his office privately. I need you to remain calm, he said, which is never what you want to hear. He pulled up security footage from the Constanza port, the embarkation footage from March 15th. I've reviewed every frame of boarding. No woman matching your description boarded this ship. He then showed me footage from Deck 7, the night of the storm. Time-stamped 11:47 p.m. The deck was empty, except for one figure. Me. Standing alone at the railing, staring out at the water. Just me. No Elena. I watched myself appear to look at something, call out to nothing, run toward the railing where no one stood. I saw her, I whispered. I spoke with her. She drew this. I held up the sketch. Stavros leaned back in his chair. I've worked on ships for 22 years. The Black Sea is old. Very old. It has been many things. Ancient lake, Roman highway, Ottoman battlefield, Soviet graveyard. Sometimes, rarely, passengers report seeing people who aren't on the manifest. Usually during storms, usually alone. He pulled up another file, this one marked confidential. 3 years ago, in 2021, this ship ran the same route. On March 18th, during a storm, a Romanian artist jumped from Deck 7. Her name was Elena Vaduva. She was 31. They recovered her body 2 days later near Varna. He turned the monitor toward me. The photo showed a woman with dark hair and sad eyes, wearing a silver anchor pendant. The woman I'd spent 2 days with. The woman who'd drawn me a jellyfish. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The cabin she jumped from was 7042. Stavros continued quietly. Your Elena told you that was her cabin, yes? I nodded, my mind fracturing. After incidents like these, some crew members report sightings. Never anything concrete. Just feelings. Glimpses. But you're the first passenger who's had such detailed interaction. The first who has physical evidence. He gestured to the sketch. I don't pretend to understand it. I just know the sea keeps what it takes, and sometimes it shows us what it's kept. The cruise continued. I stayed in my cabin mostly, clutching that sketch like a lifeline. When we docked in Varna, I did my own research. Found Elena Vaduva's obituary, saw photos of her art, the same style, the same haunted sea creatures. Read that she'd been struggling with depression, that she'd been traveling alone to find reason to keep living. She hadn't found it. I'm back on land now, back in Sevastopol. The sketch hangs. In my office, professionally preserved. Some days I think I experienced a shared psychosis brought on by isolation and the sea's hypnotic rhythm. Other days I know, with absolute certainty, that Elena found me on that ship. That for 2 days, she was real again, present again, connected again. That maybe the Black Sea gave her one more chance to feel what she'd been looking for. Companionship without judgment, conversation without pretense, a moment of peace before the storm. I don't take cruises anymore. I study the sea from shore now. But sometimes, when the wind is right and the water is dark, I swear I can see her standing at the edge of the waves, sketchbook in hand, finally drawing the beauty she could never quite capture in life. And I wave back to the woman who made me question everything I thought I knew about what's real, what's possible, and what the sea remembers in its ancient, endless depths. They call me Marina now, though back in Bucharest I went by a different name in a different life. I'm 41 years old, and what happened aboard the MS Azure Dream during the summer of 2023 stripped away every illusion I had about controlling the uncontrollable. I was the chief medical officer on that ship, responsible for over 1,000 lives. And on July 8th, I diagnosed something that should have stayed buried in medieval graves forever. The Istanbul departure was flawless. Perfect weather, excited passengers, a ship running like clockwork. I'd been working luxury cruise liners for 12 years, and the Azure Dream was the finest vessel I'd ever served on. State-of-the-art medical facilities, experienced crew, routes that showcased the Black Sea's most beautiful ports. My team consisted of 2 nurses, a physician's assistant, and enough medical supplies to handle anything short of major surgery. We were confident, professional, completely unprepared. Trabzon was our first stop. A Turkish port city with Byzantine ruins, bustling markets, and newly opened archaeological sites that promised glimpses into ancient history. Most passengers disembarked for the day tours. I stayed aboard catching up on paperwork, enjoying the rare quiet that came when hundreds of tourists scattered into a port city. They returned by evening, sunburned and happy, loaded with souvenirs and stories. Everything seemed normal. Dimitri's changed that the next afternoon. He staggered into my clinic looking like death had already claimed half of him. This Greek passenger who'd been laughing at breakfast now couldn't stand without support. His wife helped him to the examination chair, her face tight with worry. The moment I started my assessment, every alarm in my medical training started screaming. Fever spiking at 39.8 Celsius, pulse racing, breathing shallow and labored. But those symptoms were manageable, treatable, routine even. What froze my hands mid-examination were his lymph nodes. Grotesquely swollen, some the size of chicken eggs, bulging visibly beneath his skin at the neck, armpits, and groin. Hard as stones, radiating heat. He whimpered when I touched them, even gently. "Where did you go in Trabzon?" I asked, already drawing blood for testing. "The Byzantine site. Those old ruins they just opened. My wife wanted photos." His voice was barely a whisper. "Doctor, what's happening to me?" I wanted to say something reassuring. Instead, I got him into isolation and started broad-spectrum antibiotics, while my mind raced through differential diagnoses. Lymphadenitis, severe bacterial infection, maybe tularemia from contaminated water. But something about the presentation, the rapid onset, the specific pattern of swelling, kept pulling up fragments from my medical school lectures on historical epidemiology. 6 hours later, 3 more passengers presented identically. Same symptoms, same grotesque lymph node swelling. All had visited the Trabzon archaeological site. By midnight, 12 cases. By the following dawn, 47 passengers and 3 crew members were showing signs of infection. The disease moved through them like wildfire. 12 to 24 hours from first symptoms to full crisis. After the lymph node swelling came skin lesions, dark necrotic patches that spread across their bodies, respiratory systems failing, delirium setting in, patients deteriorating so rapidly that I was losing track of who needed the most urgent intervention. I spent all night running tests, cross-referencing symptoms, consulting medical databases via satellite internet. And then, at 3 a.m. on July 9th, staring at blood cultures that confirmed my worst suspicion, I had to accept the impossible. Yersinia pestis, bubonic plague, the Black Death that had killed a third of Europe in the 1300s, was alive and spreading through my ship. Captain Henrik took my diagnosis seriously, despite how insane it sounded. Within the hour, he'd contacted Turkish maritime authorities, WHO, every relevant medical organization. The response was immediate and terrifying. Remain at sea, full quarantine. No port would accept us until the situation was contained. We were floating pariahs, and everyone aboard was now a potential vector for a disease that belonged in history books. Word spread among passengers faster than I could control it. Someone posted to social media before we could shut down communications. By morning, everyone knew. And plague is a word that destroys rational thought. It carries centuries of mass graves and desperate fear. People who'd been calm tourists the day before became panicked animals looking for escape. I converted the ship's theater into an emergency ward. My small medical team worked shifts so brutal that we stopped tracking hours and just kept moving between patients. The Turkish authorities arranged helicopter drops of antibiotics, protective equipment, testing supplies. Modern medicine was working. If we caught cases early, treated aggressively, the antibiotics killed the bacteria. But our supply was finite, and new cases kept appearing. On day 3, something didn't add up. Thomas, a young deckhand, came to me with symptoms. 23 years old, terrified, lymph nodes already swelling. But he insisted he'd been working during the Trabzon stop, never went ashore, never visited the archaeological site. If you didn't go ashore, how were you exposed? I demanded, too exhausted for gentleness. He broke down, confessed through tears that he and 2 other crew members had been paid by a passenger to smuggle items aboard in Trabzon. Archaeological fragments. Small artifacts the passenger claimed were just souvenirs, didn't want to deal with export paperwork. They'd hidden them in crew storage areas. Every cell in my body went cold. Plague bacteria can survive in buried human remains for centuries under right conditions. Those ruins in Trabzon, if they included plague burial pits, and if someone had disturbed them, extracted artifacts contaminated with dormant Yersinia pestis, then brought them onto a ship with recycled air systems and over 1,000 people in close quarters. I had Thomas show me where they'd hidden everything. Behind cleaning supplies and crew quarters, wrapped carelessly in cloth and plastic, were pottery fragments, carved stone pieces, and what made my stomach turn, yellowed human bone fragments. From a burial site, possibly a mass grave, definitely contaminated. Kamal, our head of security, helped me seal everything in biohazard containment. A former Turkish naval officer, he understood immediately what this meant legally. Criminal negligence, international trafficking of stolen cultural artifacts. If people die from this, those crew members and whoever paid them face serious charges. Right now, I need to stop more people from dying, I said. Legal consequences can wait. But consequences were already cascading beyond disease. a group of passengers led by a German businessman named Klaus decided they'd had enough of quarantine. About 50 people, scared and desperate, demanded the captain bring us to shore immediately. International maritime law meant nothing to them. They just wanted off this floating plague ship. On July 12th, they tried to take the bridge by force, armed themselves with kitchen knives, fire extinguishers, whatever they could grab. Henrik locked down command and called for security. But we didn't have enough personnel to control an actual mutiny. Kamal's team managed to stop them, but it was close. Terrifyingly close to complete chaos. I had to face everyone that evening in the theater-turned-hospital, still in my protective gear, running on maybe 4 hours of sleep in 3 days. Stood in front of hundreds of terrified people and tried to make them understand. Forcing us to dock spreads this to cities. Millions exposed. The antibiotics work if we give them time. Please, just hold on. A mother in the back, her child clearly symptomatic, shouted at me. How much time? How many more die before you admit you've lost control? She wasn't wrong. 59 confirmed cases. 12 dead. Numbers that haunted every moment I closed my eyes. Turkish military finally arranged for us to dock at a remote facility near Sinop on July 14th. 1 week after the outbreak began, military medical teams in full hazmat suits descended on us. Every person tested, documented, treated. Symptomatic passengers transferred to mainland isolation facilities. The ship would undergo complete decontamination before sailing again. The aftermath destroyed lives systematically. Tomas and the other crew members who'd smuggled the artifacts were arrested, faced international charges. The passenger who'd paid them, a British antiquities dealer named Robert, was charged with trafficking and criminal negligence, resulting in death. The Trabzon archaeological site was permanently closed after investigators confirmed it was a Byzantine-era plague burial pit, improperly excavated by treasure hunters who'd had no idea what they were disturbing. Final count, 78 infected out of 155 people aboard. 18 dead, 12 passengers, 6 crew. Dimitri survived. His wife didn't. She caught it from him before we'd established proper isolation protocols. The guilt in his eyes when I told him still wakes me up some nights. I resigned 6 months later. Couldn't step onto another ship without seeing those swollen lymph nodes, without hearing patients struggling to breathe, without feeling the weight of making life or death decisions while trapped at sea with nowhere to evacuate the dying. The WHO studied our outbreak extensively, wrote papers, updated protocols. They called me a hero for containment. Heroes don't carry 18 names like weights around their necks. I work in a small clinic in Bucharest now. Solid ground. No recycled air carrying ancient bacteria through enclosed spaces. But sometimes I see tourists planning archaeological tours, and I want to warn them. Leave the past buried. Leave the dead alone. You don't know what's waiting in disturbed graves. The Azure Dream was scrapped. Too contaminated, too haunted by what happened aboard. I sometimes wonder if they found all the artifacts Thomas smuggled, or if somewhere in storage facilities or scrap yards, pieces of infected Byzantine pottery still carry dormant bacteria, waiting for the next curious hands. History isn't safely contained in museums. It lives in the ground, in bones, in graves we're arrogant enough to disturb. We dragged the Black Death back from medieval burial pits in 2023 for some stolen souvenirs and the assumption that we'd conquered diseases we'd barely survived. 18 people paid for that arrogance with their lives, and I remember every single one of their names. My name is Christopher, and on our honeymoon cruise departing Odessa on September 3rd, 2024, my wife and I were upgraded to cabin 3013. the cabin where 3 previous occupants committed suicide. We didn't know that when we first walked through the door, champagne in hand, laughing at our incredible luck. We just thought the universe was finally being kind to us. Sophie and I had scraped together every penny for this Black Sea cruise, budgeting obsessively, cutting corners everywhere we could. We'd booked the cheapest interior cabin available, no windows, barely room to turn around. So when the cruise directors stopped us at embarkation and told us we'd been upgraded to a premium balcony suite at no extra charge, we thought we'd won the lottery. Sophie actually squealed with excitement, grabbed my arm and bounced on her toes like a child on Christmas morning. 26 years old, brilliant smile, auburn hair catching the Ukrainian sunlight. We'd been married exactly 8 days. This cruise was supposed to be the adventure that started our life together, the memories we'd tell our children about someday. Instead, it became the thing that ended us. Cabin 3013 was gorgeous. Spacious living area with plush furniture, king-sized bed with Egyptian cotton sheets, massive bathroom with a rainfall shower, and the balcony. God, that balcony. Private, overlooking the endless Black Sea with cushioned chairs perfect for morning coffee or evening wine. The cabin was on deck 3, quieter than the upper decks, away from the pool noise and constant foot traffic. Private, isolated. We thought that was a blessing. This is incredible, Sophie breathed, spinning in the middle of the room. Christopher, how did we get this lucky? Maybe they overbooked and needed to move people around, I said, already unpacking. Maybe someone canceled last minute. Who cares? We're here now. We spent that first day exploring the ship, eating at the buffet, watching Odysseus' coastline fade into the distance. Everything was perfect. Sophie was radiant, constantly taking photos, posting to social media with captions about fairy tale honeymoons and dreams coming true. We had dinner at the formal restaurant, danced at the nightclub, made love on those expensive sheets while the ship rocked gently beneath us. When we finally fell asleep around 2 a.m., wrapped around each other, I remember thinking I was the luckiest man alive. Sophie woke me at 4 a.m., shaking my shoulder urgently. Christopher, wake up. Do you hear that? I dragged myself from sleep, groggy and confused. Hear what? The crying, in the walls. Listen. I listened, heard nothing except the ambient hum of the ship's engines, the distant sound of waves. Babe, there's nothing. You probably heard pipes or something. Ships make weird noises. No. Her voice was tight, frightened. It was crying, a woman crying, like sobbing. It woke me up. I pulled her close, kissed her forehead. You're in a strange place. Strange sounds. Your brain is probably just processing everything from today. Come on, let's get some sleep. She settled eventually, but I felt her lying rigid beside me for a long time before her breathing finally evened out. I didn't think much of it then. New brides, strange environments, overactive imaginations. Completely normal. The next day was Sevastopol. We went ashore, toured historical sites, bought ridiculous tourist souvenirs. Sophie seemed fine, her usual energetic self, though I caught her looking tired a few times. When I asked if she'd slept okay after the 4 a.m. wake-up, she just shrugged and changed the subject. We got back to the ship around 6 p.m., showered, and prepared for the evening. That's when Sophie went into the bathroom to fix her makeup and started screaming. I ran in to find her backed against the wall, pointing at the mirror. The mirror was fogged from shower steam, which was normal. What wasn't normal were the words appearing in the condensation. Not written with a finger, but appearing on their own, as if someone on the other side of the glass was writing, "Get out." What the hell? I grabbed a towel, wiped the mirror clean. Just normal glass, Nothing strange. No explanation. Sophie, did you write that? Are you insane? Why would I write that and then scream? Her hands were shaking. Christopher, something wrote that. While I was standing here, I watched the letters appear. That's impossible. Condensation doesn't work that way. Someone must have written it earlier, and the steam made it visible. It's an old prank. Who would do that? This is our cabin. I didn't have a good answer. We got dressed in tense silence and went to dinner, but Sophie barely ate. Kept looking around nervously, jumping at sounds. That night, I requested a cabin change at the guest services desk. The woman behind the counter checked her computer and shook her head apologetically. I'm sorry, sir. We're completely full. Every cabin is occupied. There's nothing available. Not even switching to a smaller cabin? We'll take anything. There truly is nothing. Is there a problem with your current cabin? Maintenance issue? What was I supposed to say? My wife sees writing in mirrors. I could imagine the looks, the assumptions. No, it's fine. Never mind. Sophie was furious when I told her. So we're just stuck there, in that room? It's 2 more nights until we reach Sochi. We can handle 2 nights. Famous last words. What I'm about to tell you sounds impossible, and I've stopped trying to convince people it happened because I know how it sounds. I know what people think when I tell this story. But I was there. I saw what I saw, and it cost me everything. We went to bed around midnight on night 2. Sophie fell asleep quickly, exhausted from stress and fear. I stayed awake reading on my phone, determined to stay alert in case anything weird happened. Around 2 a.m. I dozed off. I woke to cold air hitting my face. The balcony door was wide open, and Sophie was standing at the railing in her nightgown, leaning forward, looking down at the black water below. Sophie! I launched out of bed, heart exploding in my chest. She didn't respond, didn't turn. Just stood there, swaying slightly, leaning further forward. I reached her in seconds, grabbed her around the waist, pulled her back from the edge. She turned to look at me with blank, unfocused eyes. Her lips were moving, whispering something I couldn't hear over the wind. I pulled her inside, slammed the balcony door shut, locked it. Sophie, Sophie, wake up! She blinked, focused on me slowly. Christopher? What's happening? Why are we out of bed? You were sleepwalking. On the balcony. Jesus Christ, Sophie, you were about to... I couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't say what I'd almost witnessed. I don't sleepwalk, she said, confused. I've never sleepwalked in my life. Well, you were. What were you saying? I heard you whispering something. She looked genuinely bewildered. I don't remember. I don't remember any of this. 1 minute I was asleep in bed, and now I'm standing here and you're terrified. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. Just sat in a chair watching her, making sure she didn't get up again. As dawn broke, I made a decision. I needed information about this cabin. Something was deeply wrong, and I needed to know what. The housekeeping staff came around 10 a.m. while Sophie was at breakfast. I cornered Oksana, the Ukrainian woman who'd been cleaning our cabin. This room, cabin 3013. Has anything happened here? Anything unusual? Her face went pale. She looked around nervously, like she was afraid of being overheard. You should not be in this cabin, she whispered. They should not put guests here. Why? What happened? She hesitated then. 3 times. 3 different people. All jumped from that balcony, all within 2 years. Last one was only 6 months ago. Now the company pretends it never happened. Books it anyway because they need the revenue. My blood turned to ice. 3 people killed themselves in this cabin? Woman on her honeymoon, man traveling alone, another woman, middle-aged, all the same, all jumped at night. Security cameras showed them walking to the balcony, climbing over, just stepping off. The woman on her honeymoon, her husband said she'd been hearing things, seeing things. Said she kept talking about voices telling her to join them in the water. I thought I might vomit. Why didn't anyone tell us? Why would they upgrade us to a suicide cabin? Oksana looked at me with something like pity. Because people don't believe in such things. Company says it's superstition. They need the booking money. I am sorry. I would tell you to leave, but where would you go? You are on a ship. I told Sophie everything. She listened in stunned silence, tears streaming down her face. So this cabin is trying to kill me? Is that what you're saying? I don't know what's happening. But we're not sleeping here tonight. We'll stay in public areas, the lounges, anywhere but this cabin. We tried. God, we tried. Spent the evening in the theater watching shows, then moved to the 24-hour cafe, then to the observation deck. But by 3 a.m., exhausted and with nowhere else to go, ship staff started asking questions. A security officer told us we needed to return to our cabin. Loitering in public areas overnight wasn't permitted. So we went back to 3013. I pushed furniture against the balcony door, created a barricade, tied a rope from Sophie's wrist to mine so I'd feel if she tried to get up, set alarms on my phone for every 30 minutes, did everything I could think of. Around 4 a.m., I woke to Sophie sitting up in bed, staring at the balcony door. The furniture I'd stacked there was still in place. She was whispering again, that same monotone voice. I shook her. "Sophie, wake up!" She turned to me, and her eyes were wrong, completely dilated, seeing something I couldn't. "They're so sad," she whispered. "They're so lonely in the water. They want company. They need me to come. They're waiting." "No one's waiting. You're having a nightmare. Stay with me. Look at me. You're safe." "I need to go to them. They're calling. Can't you hear them calling?" I held her for hours while she struggled weakly against me, whispering about voices and water and loneliness. Dawn finally came. She snapped out of it around 6 a.m., looked at me with exhausted confusion. "What happened? You don't remember?" "I remember dreams? Voices? Christopher, I feel like I'm losing my mind." We docked in Sochi at 10 a.m. on September 6th. I've never been so grateful to see land in my life. We got off that ship and never looked back. Didn't even collect all our luggage, just grabbed essentials and ran. Sophie seemed fine once we were on solid ground. Laughed about it, actually. Said it must have been stress, bad food, some kind of temporary psychological break from wedding planning stress. She didn't remember most of what happened. Didn't remember standing on the balcony, didn't remember the things she'd said about voices in the water. But I remembered. And 6 months later, when she filed for divorce, I understood why. Because I couldn't let it go. Couldn't stop talking about what happened. Couldn't stop researching the cabin, the suicides, trying to understand. She said I'd become obsessed, paranoid, that I was making our honeymoon trauma into something bigger than it was. "You're making me feel crazy," she said during one of our last arguments. "Nothing happened except some bad dreams and you freaking out. But you've convinced yourself we survived some supernatural attack. I can't live with someone who's this unstable." Maybe she's right. Maybe I did imagine the worst of it, blown everything out of proportion. But I know what I saw. I know what she said. And I know that 3 people before her walked onto that balcony and stepped off into the Black Sea, and my wife almost became the fourth. The MS Azure Dream still operates. They still book cabin 3013. I've checked. And I wonder sometimes how many more people have stood at that railing in the dark, hearing voices from the water, feeling the pull of all that lonely darkness below. I wonder if anyone else has caught their loved one just in time, or if I was just lucky. Sophie moved on, remarried last year from what I've heard. She's probably right that I'm obsessed, that I'm unstable, but I'm alive. And more importantly, so is she. Even if she doesn't remember why that matters. Even if I lost her anyway to the thing I was trying to protect her from. Some rooms remember what happened in them. And cabin 3013 remembers how to kill. My name is Victor. And on November 19th, 2023, during routine maintenance between Batumi and Constanza, I found something living in our ship's engine room that wasn't human. Well, it had been human once. But 30 years working maritime vessels teaches you to recognize the difference between a man and a creature. And what I encountered in the depths of the MV Carpathian Star that November night had crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. I'd been chief engineer on the Carpathian Star for 8 months. She was a cargo passenger hybrid, one of those vessels that hauled freight containers while carrying a few hundred tourists who wanted cheap passage across the Black Sea. Not glamorous work, but steady. The engine room was my domain. 4 levels of machinery, pipes, generators, and systems that most passengers never knew existed. I knew every sound, every vibration, every hiss and clank that ship made. Which is why I noticed when something changed. The sound started 3 days out of Batumi. Nothing obvious, just wrong. A scratching that didn't match any mechanical process I knew. Intermittent tapping from somewhere deep in the restricted sections. Sounds that came at irregular intervals, usually during shift changes when fewer crew were below deck. I checked everything twice. Lubrication systems, cooling pumps, electrical conduits, ventilation fans. Everything functioned perfectly. The sounds had no mechanical source. By day 3, it was driving me insane. 30 years of engine room experience, and I couldn't identify mysterious noises coming from my own ship. Professional pride demanded I find the source. Plus, unexplained sounds in a ship's engine room can mean catastrophic failure if ignored. I'd seen vessels sink because engineers dismissed minor anomalies. November 19th was a calm night. Most passengers were asleep or in the upper deck lounges. My crew was finishing evening maintenance routines. Perfect time for investigating without interference. I took a flashlight, toolkit, and emergency radio down to level 4, the deepest accessible part of the engine room. The scratching had been loudest there the previous night. Level 4 housed the main propulsion systems and water intake mechanisms. Restricted area, dangerous machinery, authorized personnel only. Hot, cramped, filled with pipes carrying superheated steam and coolant. The kind of place where one wrong step could kill you in several different ways. I'd been working spaces like this since I was 22 years old. I knew how to be careful. The scratching was coming from behind the main intake manifold, in a maintenance crawlway I hadn't accessed in months. Narrow space, barely tall enough to crawl through, designed for emergency repairs to the water circulation system. I squeezed inside with my flashlight, following decades-old blueprints mentally mapped in my head. That's when I found the nest. Someone had been living in the crawlway, living there for weeks, maybe months. Makeshift bedding from stolen ship linens, food containers, empty water bottles, human waste in corners. But what made my skin crawl were the markings on the walls. Scratches carved into metal with fingernails, repetitive patterns like desperate tallying of days, and crude drawings that looked like maps of the ship's interior layout. This wasn't some passenger who'd gotten lost. This was deliberate habitation in one of the most dangerous, inaccessible parts of the ship. Someone had been surviving down here, learning the ship's systems, moving through maintenance spaces like a rat in the walls. I backed out of the crawlway immediately, reached for my radio to alert security. That's when I heard breathing behind me. Slow, ragged, the sound of someone trying very hard to stay quiet. I turned around slowly, flashlight beam cutting through the mechanical shadows. For a moment, I saw nothing. Then movement, deeper in the engine room, between the generator housings. A shape that might have been human, hunched over, retreating further into the darkness. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing off metal surfaces. "You're not supposed to be down here. This is a restricted area." The breathing stopped. Complete silence, except for the engine room's normal mechanical symphony. But I could feel presence, the weight of someone watching from the shadows. 30 years of ship work develops instincts. I knew I wasn't alone. Professional protocol said I should retreat, call security, let trained personnel handle a possible stowaway situation. But this was my engine room, my responsibility, my domain being violated by someone who could sabotage critical systems or hurt themselves in dangerous machinery. I needed to assess the situation before involving others. I moved deeper into level 4, following the path I'd seen the figure take. Between generator housing units, through a maintenance gap, toward the emergency access tunnels that connected different engine room sections. My flashlight beam swept methodically, looking for movement, for evidence, for anything that would explain what I'd found. The attack came from above. Something dropped from the ceiling pipes onto my back, driving me to the floor. Human weight, but wrong somehow. Too light, too sharp, moving with desperate animal panic. Fingernails clawed at my face, trying to reach my eyes. A voice barely recognizable as human, making sounds like growling mixed with sobbing. I threw him off, scrambled backward, finally got my flashlight beam on my attacker. What I saw will never leave my mind, no matter how much I drink to forget it. He had been a man once, maybe 40 years old, though it was hard to tell. Emaciated to skeletal thinness, skin gray and filthy, hair grown wild and matted. Clothes that had once been crew uniform, now rotted rags hanging from bones. But his eyes held no human recognition, just animal terror and predatory calculation. Think of this. A human being, isolated in ship, machinery for months, slowly losing sanity in darkness and mechanical noise, surviving on stolen scraps, becoming something else entirely. "Please," I said, hands raised, trying to project calm authority. "I'm not going to hurt you. Let me help. We can get you medical attention, food, proper—" He lunged again, this time with a piece of sharp metal torn from somewhere in the engine room. I dodged, but he was faster than his appearance suggested. Desperation and madness had made him efficient. He slashed at my arm, drawing blood, then grabbed my flashlight and smashed it against a pipe. Darkness, complete, absolute darkness in the deep engine room. And somewhere in that darkness, a creature that had once been human was hunting me with intimate knowledge of every pipe, every crawlway, every hiding place in my own domain. I ran. 30 years of experience navigating these spaces in emergency lighting, and I ran like a terrified child. Behind me, I could hear him following, not running, but moving with horrible confidence through the dark. Scratching sounds as he climbed pipes, the scrape of metal on metal as he used maintenance passages I'd forgotten existed. He was hurting me, driving me deeper into the engine room, away from exits, toward the water intake system where the ship's hull was thinnest and the machinery was most dangerous. I realized with growing horror that he knew exactly where he was taking me. I reached the intake manifold chamber, felt my way along familiar pipes, tried to orient myself toward an exit route. That's when I heard him speak, the first human words since the attack. "Found me," he whispered from somewhere very close. Just like the other one. Had to stop him too. Had to keep the secret safe. Other one. My blood went cold as I understood what he meant. 3 months ago, we'd lost an engineer named Dmitri during a routine maintenance shift. Found him drowned in the bilge pumps, assumed he'd slipped and fallen. Accident report filed, insurance claim processed, replacement crew hired. But maybe Dmitri had found the nest too. Maybe Dmitri had discovered our stowaway and paid for it. I felt along the pipes, trying to find a way out of the intake chamber. My fingers touched something that shouldn't be there. Clothing, caught on a valve handle. I pulled it free, recognized it by touch. Dmitri's work shirt, torn and stained with something I didn't want to identify. He tried to turn me in. The voice whispered, closer now. Tried to call security. But I know all the ways. All the hidden paths. Been watching, learning. Ship is my home now. My territory. The water intake system activated with a massive mechanical groan. Pumps engaging, valves opening, thousands of gallons of black seawater rushing through the chamber. Emergency protocol: during rough weather, the system would run for 20 minutes, then cycle off. Which meant I had 20 minutes before the chamber flooded completely. I heard him moving through the rising, water, unafraid, probably planning to hold me under when the intake pressure peaked. He'd done this before. He knew exactly how long it took for the chamber to become a death trap. But I had one advantage. I knew how to shut it down. The emergency cutoff was manually operated, located near the chamber's entrance. If I could reach it before the water level rose too high, I could stop the intake cycle. But that meant moving toward him, toward the entrance where he was probably waiting. Water was already knee-deep and rising fast. The sound of rushing liquid made it impossible to track his movement by sound. I felt my way along the chamber wall, moving toward where I remembered the cutoff valve being located. Something grabbed my ankle underwater, pulled me down into the cold, rushing darkness. Hands, human hands, but with fingernails grown long and sharp, clawed at my face, my throat, trying to hold me under while the water level continued rising. We fought in the flooding chamber, 2 men grappling in industrial darkness while machinery roared around us. He was weaker physically, but desperation and madness made him vicious. He fought like a cornered animal, all teeth and claws and horrible determination. I managed to break free, gasped for air, found the chamber wall again. Water was chest deep now, pressure increasing as pumps forced more black sea through the intake system. Maybe 10 minutes before the chamber became completely impassable. My hands found the emergency cutoff valve. But it was designed to prevent accidental activation, required a special tool to operate. A tool I didn't have. A tool that was located in the emergency kit near the chamber entrance, near where he was waiting. The water was neck deep when I made my decision. I couldn't outlast the flood, couldn't fight him indefinitely in his element. But I could use the system against him. I let myself sink underwater, felt along the bottom of the chamber until I found what I was looking for. The manual drain valve. Not an emergency system, just a maintenance feature for emptying the chamber during repairs. It would take several minutes to drain, but it would drain faster than the intake could refill if I could jam the intake valves partially closed. Underwater, holding my breath, I fought with corroded valve wheels and seized mechanisms, Above me, I could hear him moving through the water, searching, probably wondering where I'd gone, whether I'd already drowned. The drain valve finally gave way. Water began rushing out through floor outlets. At the same time, I managed to partially close 2 of the intake valves, reducing the flow rate. The chamber would still flood, but slower. Maybe slow enough. I surfaced as quietly as possible, tried to control my breathing. The water level had stopped rising, started dropping slowly, but he'd heard me surface, heard the change in water flow. He was coming. Clever engineer. His voice echoed through the chamber. But I know more tricks. Been living in these machines for so long. They talk to me now. Tell me their secrets. That's when I realized something that made my skin crawl. He wasn't just surviving in the engine room. He was learning it. Understanding systems better than someone should be able to without training. Maybe isolation and madness had given him a different kind of intelligence. Maybe desperation had taught him to read mechanical systems like language. The water was waist-deep and dropping when he found me. Attacked again, but this time I was ready. 30 years of wrestling with stubborn machinery had given me strength he didn't have. I managed to pin him against the chamber wall, hold him there while water continued draining around us. "Listen to me," I said, trying one more time to reach whatever humanity might be left. "I don't know how you got here or why you're hiding, but this has to stop. People have died. You killed Dmitri. This isn't survival anymore, it's murder." He looked at me with those empty animal eyes. "Ship is home. Ship is safe. People want to take me away from home. Take me back to the world that hurt me. Can't let that happen. Ever." That's when I understood. This wasn't just madness from isolation. This was someone who'd been broken before he ever came aboard. Someone who'd found in the ship's mechanical depths the only peace he'd ever known. And he'd kill anyone who threatened to take it away. I held him underwater until he stopped struggling. Until the thing that had once been human finally went still. Then I opened the main drain completely and let the Black Sea wash away what remained. I retired the next day. 30 years of maritime service ended by one night in an engine room that taught me there are worse things than mechanical failure. The official report listed the stowaway as an unknown vagrant who'd fallen into the intake system during a maintenance accident. No investigation, no questions about how he'd survived undetected for months, or what had really happened to Dmitri. I moved to a small apartment in Sevastopol, as far from the water as I could get. But some nights I still hear it. Scratching sounds in the walls, mechanical noises that don't match any system I know. And I wonder if every ship carries something living in its depths. Something that's made the machinery its home and will kill to keep it. The Carpathian Star still operates. New chief engineer, new crew, same engine room. I wonder sometimes if they've heard the scratching yet. If they've found evidence of something living where nothing should survive. If they're smart enough to leave it alone or curious enough to investigate. Because now I know. Some discoveries aren't worth making. Some mysteries are better left unsolved. And some spaces are better left unexplored, even when they're technically yours to command. My name is Svetlana, and on a June 2024 cruise from Sochi to Varna, I was invited to an exclusive midnight auction that was selling far more than art. I deal in high-end antiquities for a living, Byzantine icons, Ottoman manuscripts, pieces that cost more than most people earn in a lifetime. I thought I'd seen every dark corner of the art world. Forgers, smugglers, collectors who didn't ask questions about provenance. I'd navigated those waters for 15 years, building a reputation as someone discreet, connected, willing to look the other way for the right price. I thought I knew exactly how corrupt my world could be. I was wrong. The MS Baltic Rose was a luxury vessel catering to wealthy Russians looking for summer Black Sea cruises with minimal tourist crowds. I'd booked passage specifically for networking. 3 oligarchs and 2 museum curators were aboard, all potential clients. The first 2 days were exactly what I'd expected. Champagne, caviar, carefully casual conversations about collections and availability. Business disguised as pleasure. The invitation appeared under my cabin door on the second night. Heavy cardstock, gold embossing, no envelope. Simple text. Exclusive private auction. Deck 2, storage room 7, midnight. Invitation only. Absolute discretion required. No signature, no RSVP information, just a room number and a time. I should have been suspicious. Should have questioned who would conduct an auction on a cruise ship, why they'd chosen me, how they'd gotten access to slip invitations under cabin doors. But curiosity is an occupational hazard in my business, and exclusive and private usually meant items too sensitive for public sale. The kind of pieces that made careers and fortunes. So at 11:55 p.m. on June 16th, I made my way to Deck 2. The storage deck, typically restricted to crew access only. The corridors were empty, dimly lit, completely different from the luxury passenger areas above. I found room 7 at the end of a narrow hallway, door slightly ajar, light spilling out. Inside, the room had been transformed. About 20 chairs arranged theater-style, facing a small raised platform. Velvet curtains covering the walls, hiding storage racks and industrial equipment. Professional lighting focused on the platform. Maybe a dozen people already seated, all wealthy-looking, all Russian or Eastern European, all watching me with the careful neutrality of people used to conducting business that didn't officially exist. A man in an expensive suit gestured me to a seat. No introductions, no small talk. Just a nod of acknowledgement that I belonged there. I sat in the back row, scanning the room, recognizing 2 faces from Moscow art circles and 1 Ukrainian I'd done business with years ago. None of them acknowledged me. Professional courtesy in situations like this: see nothing, remember nothing, admit nothing. At exactly midnight, a woman stepped onto the platform. 40s, immaculately dressed, speaking Russian with a Moscow accent. Welcome to tonight's special collection. All items are available for immediate purchase. Payment in cryptocurrency only. All transactions anonymous and untraceable. Bidding will begin shortly. She started with art pieces. A Fabergé cigarette case, provenance questionable but craftsmanship authentic. Bidding reached $50,000. Then a Byzantine icon that I immediately recognized as stolen from a Bulgarian monastery 3 years ago. Bidding reached $200,000. Standard black market auction, exactly what I'd expected. Illegal but familiar territory. Then the merchandise changed. Next item, the woman announced. Complete identity package. European Union passport, driving license, birth certificate, financial history. Name and photograph customized to buyer specifications. Perfect documentation for relocation or business purposes requiring discretion. She held up sample documents. They looked absolutely authentic. And suddenly, I understood this wasn't just an art auction. This was a full-service criminal marketplace operating on a cruise ship, selling to wealthy clients with questionable needs. Forged documents sold for $75,000. Then came more. Encrypted communication devices, corporate account access credentials for Eastern European banks, even what the auctioneer delicately called consulting services for asset relocation. Money laundering, in plain language. I should have left then. Should have recognized I'd stumbled into something far beyond art smuggling. But I stayed, frozen by the sheer audacity of conducting this operation on a passenger ship, curious about how deep this actually went. You're going to wish you'd stayed curious about art instead of people. Because what came next destroyed any illusion that this was just white-collar crime. The woman's tone shifted, became almost apologetic. Our final offerings tonight are experiential packages for distinguished clients seeking ultimate discretion in their entertainment preferences. She pressed a remote. The curtains behind her opened, revealing a one-way mirror window. Beyond it, a small room. And in that room, 3 young women and 2 young men, all in cruise staff uniforms, all looking terrified. Each package includes 12 hours of exclusive access aboard ship, complete privacy, no questions asked, no documentation. Participants are carefully selected from crew members with limited family connections and financial vulnerabilities. All have signed confidentiality agreements. Starting bid, $25,000 per package. The room erupted in casual bidding. Like they were purchasing artwork, like those terrified people behind the glass were objects instead of human beings being sold for rape. I felt my blood turn to ice, then to fire. This wasn't smuggling. This was human trafficking. Crew members being sold to wealthy passengers for entertainment. And everyone in this room was participating like it was just another transaction. I forced my face to remain neutral, pulled my phone from my purse as casually as possible, pretended to check messages while actually starting a voice recording. Kept my phone in my lap, microphone pointed toward the platform, capturing every word. The bidding concluded. 3 different buyers purchasing packages. The woman provided room numbers where their purchases would be delivered within the hour. Clinical, professional, monstrous. This concludes tonight's auction. You may collect your items from the processing area. Please maintain absolute discretion. Our operation depends on mutual trust and silence. People began standing, moving toward a side door where they'd presumably collect whatever they'd purchased. I needed to leave. Needed to get this recording to actual authorities. But as I stood, the Ukrainian I'd recognized earlier made eye contact, looked at me with sudden recognition, then at my phone in my hand. His expression changed. He leaned toward the man in the expensive suit, whispered something while looking directly at me. The suited man's eyes locked onto mine. Cold calculation. He said something into a radio. I walked toward the exit, trying to project calm confidence. Made it into the corridor. Started toward the stairwell that would take me back to passenger decks. "Excuse me, miss." 2 security officers appeared from nowhere, blocking my path. Ship's security uniforms, but their eyes were wrong. Too hard, too professional. "We need you to come with us. Routine verification of your invitation." "I don't think so." I turned, started walking the other direction. Fast, but not running. Running would confirm I had something to hide. They followed, footsteps echoing in the empty corridor. "Miss, please stop. This won't take long." I ran, stupid heels making it awkward, but I ran. Hit the stairwell door, took stairs 2 at a time up toward passenger decks. Behind me, radio chatter, multiple footsteps. They weren't being subtle anymore. I burst onto deck 5, passenger territory, people still walking around despite the late hour. The security officers couldn't grab me in front of witnesses. I headed toward the crowded bar area, trying to blend into late-night socializers while my mind raced. My phone had the recording, proof of everything I'd witnessed. But I couldn't call anyone. Ship's communications went through systems they probably controlled. Couldn't go to ship security, clearly compromised. Couldn't trust the captain or crew. and we were at sea, hours from any port. I needed to survive until Varna. Needed to stay in public areas where they couldn't quietly disappear me. Needed to keep this recording safe until I could get it to real authorities. I ordered a drink at the bar, hands shaking, watching the entrance. One of the security officers appeared, scanning the crowd. Made eye contact with me. Spoke into his radio. Didn't approach, but didn't leave either. Just watched, waiting for me to make a mistake, to isolate myself. The bartender was a young Romanian woman, maybe 25. I recognized her face. She'd been one of the terrified people behind that mirror. "Please," I whispered when she brought my drink. "I need help. I know what's happening to you and the others. I have proof. But they know I know, and they're going to kill me before we reach port." She looked at me with dead eyes. "You can't help. No one helps. If you try, you die. If I help you, I die. We're already dead in every way that matters. I have recordings, names, everything. If I can get this to authorities in Varna." "The first officer is part of it." She cut me off, voice flat. "Half the security team, the cruise director. They have people at the ports too. Even if you make it off this ship, they'll find you in Varna. They own the harbor authorities." My stomach dropped. Then what do? Delete the recording. Forget what you saw. That's how you survive. She walked away to serve other customers, leaving me with a drink and the understanding that I was completely alone. I spent that night in the 24-hour cafe, surrounded by insomniacs and drunk passengers. The security officer watched from outside. Every time I moved, he moved. Every time I went near an exit, another officer appeared. They weren't trying to grab me. They were herding me, waiting for me to tire, to make a mistake, to give them an opportunity to act without witnesses. By dawn, I had a plan. Risky, probably stupid, but the only option I could see. We'd dock in Varna at 10 a.m. during disembarkation chaos, with hundreds of passengers leaving simultaneously. I'd have maybe 30 minutes where security would be stretched thin. At 8 a.m., I uploaded the recording to 3 different cloud storage services from the ship's internet cafe using public Wi-Fi. Sent encrypted links to contacts in Moscow, Berlin, and London, with instructions to open if they didn't hear from me within 48 hours. Dead man's switch. Digital insurance. Then I went to my cabin. Packed quickly. The security officer was stationed outside my door now, not even pretending subtlety. I smiled at him. "Just preparing to disembark, looking forward to seeing Varna." He smiled back. "You should be careful in Varna. Foreign ports can be dangerous for tourists who don't know the right people." At 9:30 a.m., disembarkation began. I joined the crowd of passengers streaming toward the gangway. The security officer followed. But in the crush of people, luggage, confused tourists asking directions, I managed to stay surrounded by witnesses. Bulgarian Port Authority officers were checking passports at the gangway. Real authorities, not cruise ship security. I waited until I was right in front of them, then loudly said in English, "I need to report a crime. Human trafficking aboard this vessel. I have evidence, and I'm in immediate danger from ship security." Everything stopped. The Port Authority officers looked at me, then at the ship security officer who'd been following me, then back at me. Passengers around us went silent, straining to hear. The Port Authority's senior officer, a woman in her 50s, said calmly, "Come with me, please, miss. We'll take your statement privately." The ship security officer tried to follow. The Port Authority woman held up her hand. "Ship security has no jurisdiction on Bulgarian soil. The passenger is under our authority now. I spent 6 hours giving statements to Bulgarian police, then Interpol agents who arrived from Sofia. Provided the recordings, the names I'd recognized, descriptions of the auction room and participants. They contacted Russian and Ukrainian authorities. Within 24 hours, coordinated raids hit the MS Baltic Rose and associated operations in 3 countries. 3 ship officers arrested, including the first officer and head of security. The woman who ran the auction disappeared before authorities could grab her, probably warned by one of the wealthy buyers. 7 crew members rescued from trafficking. 12 buyers identified through financial transaction analysis, though most will probably escape prosecution through diplomatic immunity or expensive lawyers. I testified in closed court hearings for months afterward. Lost clients who didn't want to be associated with someone who cooperated with authorities. Lost others who decided I was too much of a liability. My business basically collapsed. Turns out discretion is valued more than morality in the art world, and I'd violated the unspoken rule: never expose the buyers. But those 7 crew members are free. The operation was dismantled, and every wealthy predator who attended that auction now knows their privacy isn't guaranteed, that someone might actually care enough to burn everything down rather than stay silent. I still deal in art, but differently now. Smaller clients, verified provenances, nothing that funds horror, and I never set foot on another cruise ship. Because I know now what luxury and wealth can hide in the dark corners of ships sailing international waters where laws blur and money can buy anything, including human beings. The MS Baltic Rose still operates under a different name, different registry. I track it sometimes, wondering if they rebuilt their operation or if exposing them actually changed anything. Wondering if those 7 people I helped free are actually safe, or if the network just adapted and found new victims. But I have the recordings. And I'll always have the recordings. Insurance against forgetting. Proof that I saw and didn't look away. Evidence that sometimes the most valuable thing you can do is destroy your own comfortable life to save strangers you'll never meet again. My name is Elif, and during our October 14th, 2024, sailing through the Black Sea's densest fog bank, I saw children playing on the deck at 3 a.m. Children who weren't on our passenger manifest. I'm the cruise director for the MS Aegean Spirit, responsible for entertainment programming, passenger satisfaction, and maintaining the cheerful atmosphere that keeps people booking return voyages. I've worked cruise ships for 11 years. I've handled drunk passengers, medical emergencies, even a small fire in the theater. I'm practical, organized, completely uninterested in ghost stories or supernatural nonsense. Which is why what happened during those 72 hours in October shattered every rational framework I'd built my career on. We departed Constanza on October 13th with 612 passengers and 248 crew. Standard autumn route, Romanian coast down to Turkish waters, then back up toward Odessa. Weather forecast predicted some fog patches, nothing unusual for mid-October Black Sea sailing. I spent departure day coordinating the welcome show, managing the kids' club staff, resolving a complaint about cabin assignments. Normal chaos that I handled with practiced efficiency. The fog rolled in around 10 p.m. that first night. Not gradually, suddenly, like someone had drawn a curtain around the ship. Visibility dropped to maybe 10 meters. Captain reduced speed immediately, activated fog protocols, posted extra lookouts. Still routine. Fog happens. We'd navigate through it safely, maybe arrive at our next port a few hours late. No big concern. I finished my evening rounds around 2:30 a.m. Checked that the late-night buffet was adequately staffed, confirmed tomorrow's shore excursion bookings, made sure the casino and bars were managing their intoxicated patrons properly. The fog had gotten denser, pressing against every window like something alive, muffling sound in an unnatural way. But ships in fog always feel eerie. Physics and psychology, nothing more. I was crossing Deck 7, the open promenade deck, when I heard them. Children laughing, playing, at 3 a.m. in dense fog, on a deck that should have been completely empty. I turned toward the sound, peering through the gray-white fog that swallowed the deck lights within meters. Shapes moving in the mist. Small shapes, child-sized, running in circles, playing what looked like tag or some chasing game. "Hello?" I called out, moving toward them. "Children, you need to be in your cabins. It's very late, and this deck is dangerous in the fog." The laughter continued. Closer now. I could almost make out details, maybe 5 or 6 children, wearing what looked like old-fashioned clothing. Dark coats, caps on the boys, dresses on the girls. Clothing styles from decades ago. Strange choice for modern parents. But some people dress their kids in vintage outfits for photos. "Where are your parents?" I approached the nearest child, a girl of maybe 8 years old. Dark hair in braids, old-fashioned dress that looked hand-sewn. She was crouched down, drawing something on the deck with chalk, completely absorbed in her game. I reached out to touch her shoulder. My hand passed through fog. Just fog. She looked up at me, smiled, and vanished like she'd never been there. The laughter stopped instantly. Complete silence except for the ship's engines and the sound of waves somewhere beyond the fog. I stood alone on an empty deck, heart pounding, trying to rationalize what I'd just seen. Hallucination. Fatigue. Fog creates optical illusions, plays tricks with sound and depth perception. Rational explanations. Had to be. Except my hand was covered in chalk dust. White chalk, exactly where I'd reached toward the girl who'd been drawing on the deck. And on the boards beneath me, a child's drawing. A ship sinking, stick figures in the water, waves drawn in careful chalk lines. I went straight to the security office, demanded to review deck camera footage from the last 30 minutes. The security officer on duty, a Greek man named Andreas, pulled up the recordings. We watched together. The footage showed me walking onto Deck 7 at 2:58 a.m. Showed me stopping, looking around, calling out to empty fog. Showed me walking toward nothing, reaching out to touch air, then standing frozen for several minutes, staring at the deck. No children, no shapes in the fog. Just me, alone, talking to myself and reacting to things that didn't exist on camera. Fog does strange things to perception, Andreas said gently. Makes people see movement that isn't there. I've worked ships for 20 years. Every time we get fog this dense, someone reports seeing things. I didn't imagine this. I held up my chalk-covered hand. Where did this come from? He looked at my hand with an expression I couldn't quite read. You probably touched something on the deck. Maintenance markings, passenger artwork, could be anything. I went back to Deck 7. The chalk drawing was gone. Just wet deck boards, cleaned by fog moisture, showing nothing. Sleep was impossible. I returned to my cabin, made coffee, tried to work on tomorrow's activity schedule. But I couldn't focus. Couldn't shake the image of those children, the sound of their laughter, the girl's smile before she vanished. At breakfast, I overheard 2 crew members talking in hushed Romanian. I speak enough to understand the gist. Saw them again last night, always in the fog. Poor things still looking for help. One of them noticed me listening, elbowed her companion, and they went silent. Saw what? I demanded. Who are you talking about? The older woman, a housekeeper named Raluca, looked at me with tired eyes. You saw the children, didn't you? That's why you look like you haven't slept. Always happens when the fog comes thick like this. Who are they? I sat down at their table, lowering my voice. Are they real? Am I losing my mind? Raluca and her companion exchanged glances. Finally, Raluca spoke. In 1961, a Soviet passenger ship called the Contaminated sank about 20 kilometers from here. Mechanical failure during fog. Most passengers evacuated, but a school group on a field trip, 28 children and 3 teachers. They got trapped below deck when the ship went down. Their bodies were never recovered. Since then, ships passing through this area during heavy fog. Some crews see them, children playing, always wearing their school uniforms from 1961, always in the fog. I wanted to laugh, wanted to dismiss this as superstitious nonsense. But something in Raluca's expression stopped me. She wasn't trying to scare me. She was trying to warn me. They're harmless mostly, she continued. Just playing, like children do. But sometimes, when the fog lasts too long, they get confused. Start thinking the living crew are playmates who can join them. Start calling people to come play. And people who follow. She trailed off, shaking her head. People who follow them do what? Walk off the deck, into the water. Fog makes them confused too, disoriented. The children don't mean harm. They're just lonely. But loneliness can be dangerous when you're already dead. Understand this clearly. I didn't believe in ghosts. Didn't believe in supernatural explanations for anything. But I also couldn't explain what I'd experienced. And dismissing experienced crew members as superstitious felt like willful ignorance. The fog didn't lift. October 15th dawned gray and thick, visibility still less than 20 meters. Captain announced we were maintaining reduced speed. All shore excursions canceled until visibility improved. Passengers grumbled, but understood. I kept the entertainment programming running, trivia contests, cooking demonstrations, anything to keep people occupied and away from the outer decks. But crew members started reporting sightings. Children seen on deck 3. Children playing hide-and-seek near the lifeboats. Children singing in the crew corridors. Always at night. Always when someone was alone. And the fog kept getting thicker. On the second night, October 16th, I was in the theater coordinating a magic show when my radio crackled. Security to cruise director. We have a situation on deck 8. One of the bartenders is on the railing. Looks like he's trying to jump. I ran. Found Andreas and 2 other security officers trying to talk down Kostas, a 24-year-old bartender from Greece. He was standing on the exterior of the railing, holding on with one hand, leaning out toward the fog-shrouded water. They need me, Kostas was saying, voice dreamy and distant. The children. They've been calling me all night. They want me to play with them. They're so sad, all alone in the water. I should go help them. Kostas, there are no children in the water, Andreas said carefully, positioning himself to grab the young man if he let go. You're confused. The fog is affecting your perception. Come back over the railing. But I can hear them. Listen. They're singing. Kostas smiled, leaning further out. It's the song my mother used to sing. They know it. They're singing it for me. I looked into the fog beyond the railing. Saw nothing. But I heard it. Children's voices singing in Russian, an old folk melody carried on the fog like sound traveling through water. Impossible. Except I was hearing it. We all were. I tried something desperate. Started singing along with the melody, but changing the words, making them gentle and firm. Come back to us, Kostas. Come back from the edge. The children are fine. They don't need you. but we do. Come back. The children's voices stopped. The fog swirled. For just a moment, I saw them. Maybe a dozen children standing on the air beyond the railing, holding hands, looking at us with sad, ancient eyes. The youngest couldn't have been more than 6. They looked at Costas, then at me, and slowly shook their heads. Like they were saying no, he shouldn't come. Like they were releasing him. Costas blinked, seemed to wake up, looked down at the water far below and panicked. We pulled him back over the railing while he sobbed in confused terror. That night I did research in the ship's library and online archives. Found records of the Contaminated disaster. October 14th, 1961. 63 years ago, exactly. Soviet passenger ship carrying workers and their families from Odessa to Sochi. School group on board for an educational field trip. Ship developed engine problems during dense fog, began taking water. Evacuation attempted, but panic and fog confused the process. Final count, 31 dead. 28 of them children aged 6 to 13. Bodies recovered, 3. The rest stayed with the ship when it sank in 200 meters of water. Never retrieved, never properly buried, never mourned beyond brief Soviet news reports that blamed mechanical failure and moved on. The fog showed no signs of lifting. October 17th, 3rd day, and visibility was worse than ever. More crew members reported hearing children singing. Some saw them playing on decks. One engineer swore he saw a little boy in the engine room, crying and asking for his mother. 3 more crew members had to be physically restrained from jumping overboard, all claiming the children needed them. Captain called a senior staff meeting. This fog is meteorologically impossible. According to weather data, it should have dispersed yesterday. But it's intensifying, and whatever's affecting the crew is spreading. I've got 18 crew members confined to quarters for their own safety. We can't operate this ship if half my crew is seeing things and trying to jump overboard. They're not seeing things, I said quietly. Everyone turned to look at me. The children are real. The Contaminated sank here 63 years ago today. 28 children drowned. No recovery, no memorial. No one remembers them except old Soviet records. And every year in mid-October when the fog comes, they come back. The captain stared at me. You're telling me my cruise director believes in ghosts? I'm telling you that dismissing this as mass hysteria isn't working. Those children are trapped here, traumatized, still looking for help that never came. And somehow the fog lets them manifest, lets them reach out to the living. They're not trying to hurt anyone. They're just children who want to be remembered. An older crew member, Romanian like Raluca, spoke up. My grandmother sailed these waters in the 1970s. She said ships always stopped and held services when passing the Contaminated site during fog. Prayers for the dead, acknowledgement that they existed. After the Soviet Union fell, people stopped remembering, stopped the services. Maybe that's why the sightings increased. I made a decision that probably violated every company policy. Tonight at midnight, we're holding a memorial service on Deck 7. For the children of the Contaminated. Everyone who wants to attend can. We're going to give them what they never got. Proper acknowledgement, respect, remembrance. The captain looked like he wanted to argue. Then he just nodded, exhausted. Fine. Try it. Can't make this situation worse. I spent the day preparing. Found the names of all 28 children from archive records. Printed them on memorial cards. Arranged candles, flowers, space for crew to gather. At 11:30 p.m., despite the fog and the fear, over 100 crew members assembled on Deck 7. I read each name aloud, age, where they'd been from, brief details from records. One had wanted to be a pilot, another loved mathematics, a third had won a drawing competition, making them real, making them remembered. You were children, I said into the fog. You were on a trip that should have been happy. You deserved to grow up. You deserved long lives. We're sorry that didn't happen. We're sorry you were forgotten. We remember you now. You can rest. You don't have to keep playing alone in the fog anymore. The crew spoke prayers in Russian, Romanian, Greek, Turkish. We sang a children's song, gentle and simple. And slowly, impossibly, the fog began to thin. By dawn on October 18th, it was gone completely. Visibility restored, normal weather patterns, and no more sightings, no more voices, no more children beckoning crew to jump. I never saw them again, neither did anyone else. The rest of the cruise was completely ordinary. But I think about them often. Those 28 children who spent 63 years lost in fog, playing eternal games, desperately reaching out to the living for acknowledgement they'd existed, that their deaths had mattered. I'm still not sure I believe in ghosts, but I believe in memory. I believe in trauma that doesn't fade. And I believe that sometimes the dead just need the living to stop. Acknowledge what was lost, and remember that behind every tragedy are names and lives and children who just wanted to grow up. Every October 14th now, wherever I am, I light 28 candles and read their names aloud. It's the least I can do for the children who taught me that skepticism isn't the same as wisdom, and that some debts the living owe the dead can never be fully repaid, only honored. My name is Waylon, and on August 22, 2024, during a routine inspection between Burgas and Trabzon, I discovered Deck 13, a deck that wasn't on any ship schematic. I'm a food safety inspector from Vancouver, contracted by cruise lines to audit their kitchen operations and certify compliance with international health standards. It's boring work mostly. Checking refrigerator temperatures, verifying supplier documentation, making sure prep surfaces are sanitized properly. I've inspected maybe 200 ships over 15 years. Never found anything more sinister than expired mayonnaise or improperly stored chicken. The MS Northern Crown was supposed to be just another routine audit. 3 days aboard, comprehensive kitchen inspection, file my report, collect my fee, move on to the next contract. The ship was old but well maintained. Built in 1987, refitted multiple times, currently operating Black Sea tourist routes under a Maltese flag. The kitchen staff was professional, documentation mostly in order, equipment adequate if dated. I was actually ahead of schedule, finishing my inspection by the second day, which left me with time to kill and professional curiosity to satisfy. I was riding the service elevator from the galley on Deck 4 back up to my cabin on Deck 9 when I noticed something odd. The elevator panel showed buttons for Decks 1 through 12, then jumped directly to 14. No Deck 13. Common superstition on ships. Many skip the number 13 to avoid spooking passengers. But this ship clearly had at least 14 decks based on its height. The math didn't work for skipping a full deck level. I pressed the button for Deck 12, decided to investigate. Architectural curiosity, nothing more. Ships are designed with specific deck heights, specific structural requirements. You can't just eliminate a full deck without affecting the ship's center of gravity and stability. So where was Deck 13? The stairwell access on Deck 12 showed the same pattern. Stairs going up from 12 led directly to a landing marked Deck 14. But the vertical distance was wrong. Too much space between landings. I measured it mentally against other deck transitions I'd climbed. There was definitely an extra level hidden between 12 and 14. I explored the Deck 12 corridor, looking for maintenance access, crew passages, anything that might lead to the hidden level. Found a door at the far end marked Authorized Personnel Only, Restricted Access. Heavy steel door, electronic keycard lock, no windows. The kind of door that says, "Nothing interesting here, move along." Which is exactly the kind of door that demands investigation. I had legitimate contractor credentials that gave me access to most ship areas for inspection purposes. I swiped my keycard. Access denied. Tried again. Denied. This door required special authorization beyond standard contractor clearance, which made no sense for what should be just a maintenance area or storage level. I could have left it alone. Should have, probably. But 15 years of inspecting hidden corners and checking sealed storage areas had taught me that the spaces people most want to keep secret are usually the spaces that most need inspection. Food safety violations happen in the places management doesn't want inspectors looking. I went back to my cabin, got my inspection toolkit. The electronic lock was sophisticated, but not military grade. These were tools designed for accessing sealed food storage areas during surprise inspections. 10 minutes of careful work, and the lock clicked open. The door opened onto a stairwell landing I'd expected to find between decks 12 and 14. A proper deck 13, just hidden from passenger access. The air that hit me was wrong immediately. Stale, chemical, like a hospital that had been sealed for years. Emergency lighting provided dim illumination. The walls were institutional gray, marked with Cyrillic lettering and safety instructions in Russian. I descended the stairs to deck 13 proper. Found myself in a corridor that looked nothing like the rest of the ship. No passenger amenities, no decorative touches. Just institutional hallway with numbered doors on both sides, fluorescent lights flickering weakly, and an atmosphere of abandonment that made my skin crawl. The first door I tried was unlocked. Inside was a small room, maybe 3 meters by 4 meters, containing a hospital bed with leather restraints, a rolling medical cart with rusted instruments, and walls lined with shelving units holding dusty medical supplies. Labels in Russian. Manufacture dates from the 1990s. Soviet-era equipment, ancient by modern standards. The second room was identical. Third room, same. Fourth room had additional equipment, ECG machine, defibrillator, cabinets full of pharmaceutical supplies with Cyrillic labels and expiration dates from 1994-1997. I pulled out my phone, started photographing everything. Whatever this was, it wasn't normal. Ships got refitted and repurposed. But you don't just seal off an entire medical deck and hide it between numbered floors. You decommission it, gut it, convert the space to something useful, unless you want people to forget it existed. The corridor extended maybe 50 meters, with approximately 20 rooms on each side. I checked more rooms, examination spaces, what looked like a pharmacy, a room with filing cabinets. I opened one cabinet, pulled out files. Patient records, names, dates, medical procedures, all in Russian, all dated 1991-1998. I don't read Russian fluently, but I know enough medical terminology to recognize what I was seeing. Experimental procedures, drug trials, protocols that mentioned subject A47 instead of patient names, consent forms that looked coerced rather than voluntary. Before and after photographs of people who looked progressively worse across sequential dates. Whatever had happened on Deck 13 hadn't been standard medical care. This had been experimentation. I photographed files, equipment, room numbers, everything I could document. My hands were shaking. Professional food safety inspection had just become something far more serious. I needed to get this evidence to authorities. Canadian Embassy, maybe Interpol. Someone who could investigate what looked like Soviet-era human rights violations. That's when I heard the elevator. Doors opening onto deck 13. Footsteps in the corridor. Multiple people moving with purpose. I killed my phone flashlight, ducked into the nearest room, pulled the door mostly closed. Through the gap, I watched 3 ship security officers and a man in a cruise line officer uniform enter the corridor. They were speaking Russian, too fast for me to follow. But the body language was clear. They knew someone had accessed Deck 13, and they were searching. One of them had a tablet, tracking something. Probably electronic access logs showing when I'd bypassed the door lock. They knew exactly where I was. The officer called out in English. "Mr. Whalen, we know you're here. Please come out. You've accessed a restricted area. We need to discuss this." I stayed silent, mind racing. If this was just an innocent misunderstanding, they'd be apologetic, not hunting me through a hidden hospital deck with security teams. They were protecting something, which meant I was in danger the moment I revealed myself. "Mr. Whalen, you're in violation of your contractor agreement. Accessing unauthorized areas is grounds for immediate termination and legal action. Come out now, and we can resolve this professionally." I waited. Heard them checking rooms, moving closer. Maybe 10 rooms away. Then 8. Then 5. I couldn't stay hidden. They'd find me within minutes. But if I went with them voluntarily, I'd lose my phone, lose the evidence, probably get detained until we reached a port where cruise line lawyers could make me disappear into legal proceedings. Turns out, the worst discoveries aren't the ones you make. They're the ones that make you realize you're now a liability to be managed. I bolted, ran from the room toward the far end of the corridor, away from the security team. Heard shouting behind me, footsteps pursuing. The corridor ended at another stairwell. I took stairs down, hoping they led somewhere I could hide or escape. Deck 13 apparently extended below the passenger levels. The lower section was even more disturbing. Operating theater with stained tables, cold storage units, a room filled with medical waste containers that I didn't want to examine closely. This wasn't just a hospital deck. This had been a complete medical facility, hidden inside what was now a tourist cruise ship. The security team was right behind me. I tried a door marked in Russian, locked. Another door, locked. Third door opened into what looked like a laboratory. I ran through, found a back exit, emerged into a maintenance corridor that might connect to the main ship infrastructure. My phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. "Stop running. Give us the phone. We can't let you leave with those photographs. This is your only warning." They were tracking my phone signal. Of course they were. I pulled the SIM card, powered down the phone completely, stuffed it into my belt. No more digital tracking. The maintenance corridor led to the engine room levels. Loud, hot, full of crew who looked at me strangely but didn't try to stop me. I emerged onto Deck 3, passenger territory, slipped into the crowd of tourists returning from shore excursions. Back in my cabin, I transferred the photographs to my laptop, uploaded copies to 3 different cloud storage accounts using the ship's Wi-Fi. Then I hid my phone inside a food safety inspection kit, specifically inside a sealed evidence container designed for transporting contaminated food samples. Airtight, opaque, labeled with biohazard warnings. The kind of container security wouldn't want to open without proper protocols. An hour later, they came for me. Ship security and the first officer. Very polite, very firm. "Mr. Whalen, we need you to come with us. There's been a complaint about your conduct." "What complaint?" "You accessed restricted areas without authorization. We've received reports you may be experiencing psychological distress. The ship's doctor needs to evaluate you. Psychological distress. The institutional gaslighting playbook. Step 1. Declare the whistleblower mentally unstable. I'm perfectly fine. I accessed a maintenance area during my inspection routine. Found some old equipment, that's all. You accessed Deck 13. There is no Deck 13 on this ship, Mr. Whalen. The elevator goes from 12 to 14. You may be confused, possibly suffering from disorientation or exhaustion. I have photographs, medical equipment, patient files, Soviet-era human experimentation. This ship was a hospital vessel before it was converted for tourism, and you've kept an entire deck hidden. The first officer's expression didn't change. Mr. Whalen, you're describing things that don't exist. This ship has been a tourist vessel since 2003. There are no hidden decks, no medical facilities beyond our standard clinic. I think the stress of travel has affected you. Please come with us to the medical bay. They weren't going to acknowledge anything. Standard cover-up. Deny everything, confiscate evidence, discredit the witness. Once I was in their medical bay, they'd sedate me, claim I was delusional, probably lock me in a cabin until we reached a port where they could transfer me to a facility they controlled. I want to speak to the Canadian Embassy. I'm a Canadian citizen, and I'm reporting serious crimes. Of course. We'll help you make that contact from the medical bay. Please come with us. I had maybe seconds before they physically forced compliance. I need to get my medication from my cabin. Blood pressure pills, prescription. Can't go anywhere without them. The first officer hesitated, then nodded. Security will escort you. In my cabin, under their watch, I grabbed my inspection kit, the one containing my hidden phone in the biohazard sample container. Need to bring my equipment. Company policy. Never leave inspection samples unattended. They didn't question it. Biohazard containers are treated carefully, even by people trying to cover up crimes. No one wants to accidentally release contaminated food samples. They took me to the medical bay. Ship's doctor, Romanian woman, professionally concerned expression. Mr. Whalen, I understand you've had a stressful experience. Let's talk about what you think you saw. I don't think I saw anything. I know what I saw. Deck 13 exists. It's a hidden medical facility from when this ship was a Soviet hospital vessel. And there are files documenting human experimentation. She made notes. Have you been sleeping well? Any history of anxiety or stress-related disorders? Classic tactic. Build a mental health narrative to discredit everything I reported. I played along, claimed I was tired, maybe overreacted, probably misinterpreted what I'd seen. Apologized for causing trouble. The doctor seemed satisfied, recommended rest, prescribed mild sedatives I had no intention of taking. They let me return to my cabin with a security officer stationed outside. Confined, monitored, waiting for the ship to reach Trabzon the next morning, where they could presumably transfer me to Turkish authorities they'd already coordinated with. But I still had my inspection kit, still had my phone. And at 3 a.m., I used the ship's Wi-Fi one more time to send detailed emails to the Canadian Embassy in Ankara, the International Maritime Organization, and 3 different investigative journalists I'd worked with on previous corruption stories. Complete evidence package. Photographs, file documents, ship registration information, timeline of events. Subject line: Canadian citizen detained aboard MS Northern Crown after discovering evidence of Soviet-era human experimentation on hidden deck. Request immediate assistance. We docked in Trabzon at 9 a.m. Turkish port authorities came aboard, but so did Canadian consular officials who'd received my 3 a.m. emails. The first officer's face when he saw diplomatic credentials was almost worth the previous day's terror. Turned out the MS Northern Crown had indeed been a Soviet medical research vessel from 1987 to 1998, operating in the Black Sea under military classification. After the Soviet collapse, it was sold to private interests, refitted for tourism. But the conversion had been cosmetic. They'd sealed Deck 13, renumbered the floors, and hoped no one would investigate too carefully. The files I'd photographed documented medical experiments on volunteer subjects, probably prisoners or institutionalized patients, testing experimental drugs and procedures that would never pass modern ethical review. Nothing was technically illegal under Soviet-era regulations, but it was deeply unethical and something the cruise line desperately wanted to keep hidden. The ship was impounded for investigation. The cruise line claimed they'd purchased it without knowing the full history, that Deck 13 had been sealed before they acquired the vessel. Plausible deniability, corporate shield against liability. But the revelation destroyed their reputation. MS Northern Crown was decommissioned 6 months later, sold for scrap. I returned to Canada, testified in multiple investigations, and became unemployable in the cruise inspection industry. Turns out companies don't want to hire inspectors who expose hidden decks and historical atrocities. Bad for business. But every time I ride an elevator and see numbers skip from 12 to 14, I wonder what's hidden in the space between. Wonder how many ships carry sealed histories in their hidden decks. Wonder how many renovated vessels still contain the ghosts of what they used to be. Because the MS Northern Crown taught me that some ships never stop being what they were built to be. You can paint over the hull, renumber the decks, fill the rooms with tourists instead of patients. But the bones remember. The sealed corridors remember. And sometimes, a bored food safety inspector opens the wrong door and discovers that the past isn't past at all. It's just hidden between floors, waiting for someone curious enough to look. My name is Natasha, and on May 5th, 2024, passengers on our Odessa to Istanbul cruise started falling into comas they'd never wake from. And I was the only one still trying to help them. I was 26 years old, third-year medical student at Moscow State University, traveling on a budget student cruise program because I couldn't afford proper vacation, but desperately needed a break from textbooks and cadaver labs. The MS student Voyager catered specifically to university students. Cheap passage, basic accommodations, communal dining. 240 students from across Eastern Europe, all young and healthy and absolutely unprepared for what was about to happen. We departed Odessa on May 4th. Typical student chaos, drinking, dancing, people hooking up in cramped cabins, late-night parties on deck. I'd made friends with a group of Ukrainian engineering students, spent the first evening playing cards and sharing terrible jokes. Around 1 a.m., someone mentioned the midnight buffet was still open. Free food. We were broke students. Of course we went. The galley had set out a spread of cold appetizers, salads, and seafood. Nothing fancy, but decent quality. I remember eating some kind of marinated fish dish, pickled vegetables, bread. My friends loaded their plates with everything. We ate, laughed, went to bed around 3 a.m. I woke at 10 a.m. feeling fine. Met my friends for late breakfast. Except Dmitri wasn't there. His roommate said he wouldn't wake up, seemed to be sleeping really deeply, wouldn't respond to shaking or noise. We joked about him being hungover, went about our day. By 2 p.m., 5 students hadn't appeared for scheduled activities. By 4 p.m., the ship's small medical clinic was overwhelmed, students being carried in by their friends, completely unconscious, unresponsive to stimuli. Not sleeping. This was deeper. Comatose. The ship's physician, an older Bulgarian doctor named Petrov, was frantically examining patients, checking vitals, trying to understand what he was seeing. I don't understand this, he kept saying. They're stable physiologically, heartbeat normal, breathing normal, no obvious trauma or toxic exposure. But they won't wake up. Complete neurological unresponsiveness. By 8 p.m., 30 students were comatose. The medical clinic couldn't handle the volume. Dr. Petrov converted the ship's small theater into an emergency ward, laying unconscious students on makeshift beds. I volunteered immediately. Third-year medical training is mostly observation. But I knew basic patient care, could monitor vitals, could help. By midnight, Dr. Petrov himself collapsed. Just stopped mid-examination, looked confused, sat down, and lost consciousness. One of the nurses went down 30 minutes later. Then the other nurse. Suddenly, I was the only person with any medical training who was still conscious and functional. Me, a medical student who'd never treated a real emergency, responsible for over 30 comatose patients with more, collapsing every hour. Listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you. Because this is when I understood that textbook medicine means nothing when you're alone on a ship at sea with people dying around you and no idea why. I tried contacting other medical professionals among the students. Found 3 nursing students, 2 pre-med undergrads. None of them had eaten at the midnight buffet. None of them were showing symptoms. We formed an emergency medical team, trying to keep patients stable while I frantically researched possible causes. Food poisoning? Wrong symptom profile. Bacterial contamination would cause gastrointestinal symptoms, not instant coma. Carbon monoxide? Impossible. Only people who'd eaten at the buffet were affected, not by location. Poisoning? But with what? And why only midnight buffet diners? More students collapsed through the night. By dawn on May 6th, we had 53 comatose patients. Some had been unconscious for over 24 hours. And here's what terrified me. Their neurological responses were deteriorating. Pupils becoming sluggish, reflexes weakening. Whatever was causing this wasn't just making them unconscious. It was progressively damaging their brains. I demanded access to the galley. Needed to know exactly what had been served at that midnight buffet. The ship's food service manager, a Greek man named Stavros, was defensive. Everything was properly prepared. Fresh ingredients, standard protocols. There's nothing wrong with our food. Then why are only people who ate from the midnight buffet unconscious? What specifically did you serve? He pulled up records. The midnight spread had included pickled vegetables from Bulgarian suppliers, bread from Turkish wholesalers, cheese from Romanian sources, and seafood, specifically marinated Black Sea anchovies and pickled mussels. Where did the seafood come from? Stavros hesitated. Local supplier in Odessa, very cheap, below market rate. The company mandated we reduce food costs this season, so I found budget suppliers. I need to see documentation. Supplier name, fishing zone, health certification. He provided paperwork that looked questionable immediately. The supplier, a company I'd never heard of, claimed the seafood came from standard Black Sea fishing zones. But the health certification stamps looked photocopied. The catch dates seemed altered. One of the engineering students I'd befriended, Yuri, was a marine science major. Still conscious because he was vegetarian and hadn't touched the seafood. I showed him the documentation. Does this look legitimate? He studied it, then pulled up maps on his laptop. These coordinates for the fishing zone. That's nowhere near standard commercial fishing areas. That's actually close to the Karkanet Bay restricted zone. Why is it restricted? Soviet-era chemical weapons disposal. They dumped thousands of tons of chemical munitions in the Black Sea during the Cold War. Most areas have been cleaned up or monitored, but some zones are still contaminated. Fish from those areas bioaccumulate toxins, organophosphates, nerve agents, heavy metals. It's absolutely illegal to harvest seafood there. My blood went cold. Organophosphate poisoning, nerve agent exposure. That would explain everything. The sudden unconsciousness, the progressive neurological deterioration, the lack of response to standard medical treatment. If people ate seafood contaminated with nerve agents, what's the treatment? Yuri looked grim. Atropine, pralidoxim, aggressive neurological support. And even then, if the exposure was significant, permanent brain damage is likely. And if treatment is delayed more than 48 hours? He didn't finish the sentence. We didn't have atropine on board, didn't have pralidoxim. The ship's medical supplies were designed for routine injuries and illnesses, not chemical weapons exposure. I went to the captain, a Ukrainian woman named Olena, and explained everything. Contaminated seafood, chemical weapons toxins, progressive brain damage. We need emergency evacuation, Coast Guard airlift. Get these patients to proper hospitals with neurotoxin treatment capabilities. We have maybe 24 hours before the damage becomes permanent for the earliest victims. Captain Olena made the calls immediately. But here's where maritime bureaucracy became a death sentence. We were in international waters, technically in Turkish jurisdiction. Emergency evacuation required coordination between Ukrainian authorities, Turkish Coast Guard, Romanian port facilities, and the ship's registry country of Malta. Everyone needed to authorize. Everyone needed to review paperwork. Everyone needed liability protection. And while they argued jurisdiction and protocols, more students fell unconscious, including me. I felt it starting around 3 p.m. on May 6th. Slight dizziness, tingling in my fingers, mild confusion. I'd eaten the same contaminated seafood 38 hours earlier. My symptoms were just slower to develop, probably because I'd eaten less than others. I had maybe 6 hours before I'd be completely unconscious like the rest. 6 hours to convince authorities to act. 6 hours to save 53 people, including myself. I recorded a video on my phone. Explained everything. Contaminated seafood, illegal fishing zone, organophosphate poisoning, treatment protocols needed. Sent it to Ukrainian health authorities, Turkish Coast Guard, every medical contact I had. Added, I'm a medical student treating over 50 neurotoxin victims with zero proper equipment. I'm developing symptoms myself. If you're watching this and I'm already unconscious, please don't let me die because bureaucrats couldn't decide who had jurisdiction. The video went viral. Not intentionally, one of the health officials I'd sent it to shared it with news media. Suddenly, there was public pressure. Young medical student desperately treating comatose classmates while slowly succumbing to the same poison. It became international news. At 8 p.m., Turkish Coast Guard finally got authorization for emergency airlift. Helicopters scrambled from Sinop. But they could only take the most critical cases. Patients who'd been unconscious longest, whose neurological deterioration was most advanced. 18 patients airlifted to specialized hospitals in Turkey and Romania. The rest of us had to wait for the ship to reach emergency docking in Samsun. I stayed conscious through sheer willpower and probably adrenaline, continuing to monitor the remaining patients even as my coordination deteriorated and my vision started tunneling. I remember arriving in Samsun. Remember Turkish medical teams in hazmat suits rushing aboard. Remember trying to explain patient conditions, but my speech was slurred. Words wouldn't form properly. Remember someone catching me as I collapsed. I woke up 4 days later in a hospital in Ankara. Intensive care, tubes everywhere. Neurologist explaining that I'd had severe organophosphate poisoning, that they'd treated me with atropine and pralidoxim, that I'd survived. The others? I asked. Her expression told me everything. Of the 53 patients who'd fallen into comas, 18 survived with minimal permanent damage. The ones who'd been airlifted early, 13 survived with moderate to severe neurological impairment. 22 died. Brain damage too extensive, treatment came too late, toxin exposure too severe. I survived, but I'm in that middle category. Permanent neurological damage. My hands shake constantly. Look, even now, see that tremor? Chronic balance issues, memory problems, difficulty with complex problem solving. My medical career is essentially over. I can't perform the fine motor tasks required for procedures. Can't handle the cognitive load of diagnostic reasoning the way I used to. The investigation revealed the supplier in Odessa had been illegally fishing in the contaminated zone for years, selling toxic seafood at below-market prices to budget operations that didn't ask questions. Criminal charges filed. Company dissolved. The food service manager on the ship claimed he didn't know, but his choice of the cheapest possible supplier without proper verification killed 22 people. The MS student Voyager stopped operations. Student cruise programs got much more expensive after that. Proper food safety inspections, verified suppliers, actual medical staff instead of single physicians. Good changes. Changes that came 22 deaths too late. I work at a medical clinic now, doing basic administrative work, helping where I can with my limitations. Sometimes families of the survivors contact me, thank me for keeping their children alive during those desperate hours. I appreciate it, but honestly, I failed. 22 people died. I couldn't save them. Being called a hero doesn't change that math. The worst part is knowing that all of it, every death, every destroyed, future, came down to someone choosing the cheapest seafood option without asking where it came from or why it cost so little. Evil doesn't always look like intentional malice. Sometimes it looks like a purchasing manager trying to cut food costs by 10%. Sometimes tragedy comes from spreadsheets and budget meetings and nobody asking the right questions. I still can't eat seafood. Can't even look at it without feeling nauseous. And every time I hear about budget cuts and food safety inspections, or companies choosing cheaper suppliers without verification, I want to scream. Because I watched what happens when cost savings matter more than safety. I watched people my age, with their whole lives ahead of them, slip into comas they'd never wake from because someone saved a few €100 on contaminated fish. 22 names. I remember all of them. I'll carry them forever in my damaged brain, even as other memories fade. That's my permanent injury. Not just the tremor or the balance issues, but the weight of everyone I couldn't save. The knowledge that textbook medicine means nothing when the system is designed to prioritize profit over people, when regulations get ignored for budget reasons, when young lives get sacrificed to quarterly earnings reports. And that's the real horror, not the poison itself, but how easily it entered the supply chain. How many people didn't ask questions? How normal it was to cut corners until those corners came together into a coffin for 22 students who just wanted cheap vacation and free midnight snacks. My name is Michael, and on December 2nd, 2023, during our Constanza to Sochi route, I arrested a passenger for theft, then found him still in his cabin, claiming he never left. I've worked ship security for 6 years, spent 12 years before that as a police officer in Detroit. I've handled drunks, smugglers, domestic disputes, medical emergencies, even a murder-suicide once. I'm trained to assess situations quickly, trust evidence over emotion, and maintain professional calm regardless of circumstances. I thought I'd seen everything human behavior could produce. I was catastrophically wrong. The call came in at 2:47 p.m. Passenger reporting theft from their cabin on deck 5. Standard procedure. I grabbed my incident kit and headed down. The complainant was a German woman, maybe 60 years old, visibly upset. Someone had entered her cabin while she was at lunch and taken jewelry from her safe. The safe hadn't been forced. Whoever did it knew the combination or had sophisticated tools. "Did you see anyone suspicious in the corridor?" I asked, taking notes. "A man. Dark hair, maybe 35, wearing a red jacket. I passed him in the hallway when I was leaving for lunch. He smiled at me. I thought he was just another passenger." I pulled up security footage on my tablet. Corridor cameras showed the timeline. German woman leaves at 1:15 p.m. 3 minutes later, a man in a red jacket approaches her cabin, looks around, uses a key card to enter. Stays inside for approximately 8 minutes. Exits carrying nothing visible, but could have jewelry in his pockets. His face was clear on camera. I ran facial recognition through our passenger database. Match found immediately. Passenger 287, cabin 3042. Registered name, Thomas, 36 years old, American citizen. Boarded in Constanza 2 days ago, traveling alone to Sochi. "I've identified the suspect," I told the German woman. "We'll recover your property and press charges." I took 2 other security officers, Romanian guy named Andrei and a Turkish woman named Zara, and went to cabin 3042. Knocked. "Ship security. Open the door, please." The door opened. Man in a red jacket matching the security footage exactly. He looked confused. "Can I help you?" "Sir, we need you to come with us. You're being detained for theft." "Theft? I haven't stolen anything. What are you talking about?" "We have video evidence of you entering cabin 5018 and taking jewelry from the safe. Please come with us quietly." He started to protest, but I was done with conversation. We escorted him to the ship's security office, sat him in the holding room, read him his rights under maritime law. He kept insisting it was a mistake, that he'd been in the ship's library all afternoon, that he'd never been to deck 5. Standard denial. They all claim innocence. I searched him. Found 3 pieces of jewelry in his jacket pocket, 2 rings and a bracelet matching the description the German woman had provided. Evidence. Open and shut. Case. "Sir, we found the stolen items on your person. This is a serious crime. You'll be detained until we reach Sochi, where you'll be turned over to Russian authorities." He looked genuinely bewildered, staring at the jewelry like he'd never seen it before. "I don't understand. Those aren't mine. I didn't take those. How did they get in my pocket?" "That's for the authorities to determine. You're being held in custody." We locked him in the brig, a small detention cell the ship maintained for exactly these situations. He sat there looking confused and frightened. But that's normal for criminals who get caught. They always think they can talk their way out. I returned to cabin 3042 to search for additional evidence. Maritime procedure requires notifying cabin mates when someone is detained. According to records, Thomas was traveling alone, single occupancy cabin. But I needed to do a thorough search anyway. I knocked. No answer. Used my master key card to enter. Thomas was sitting on the bed, reading a book. The same man I'd just locked in the brig. Identical. Same face, same dark hair, same build. Wearing different clothes, jeans and a gray shirt instead of the red jacket, but absolutely, unmistakably, the same person. "Thomas," I said, my professional composure fracturing. He looked up. "Yes? Oh, security. Is something wrong?" I need to see your identification. He pulled out his passport, handed it to me without hesitation. Passport number matched ship records. Photograph matched his face. Valid travel stamps. Everything correct. Where have you been for the last hour? I asked, my voice tighter than I wanted. Right here, reading. I had lunch around noon, came back to my cabin around 1:30, been here since. Why? I pulled out my tablet, showed him the security footage of him entering the German woman's cabin. Is this you? He studied it, frowning. That looks like me. That's my red jacket. But I haven't left this cabin in over an hour. I don't understand what I'm looking at. Sir, we arrested you 15 minutes ago for theft. You're currently locked in the ship's detention cell. So, how are you also here in your cabin? He stared at me like I was insane. You arrested me? I've been right here. No one's arrested me. Are you feeling okay? Reality does this thing sometimes, where it presents you with information that can't coexist, and your brain just stops, like hitting a logical wall at full speed. I was experiencing that wall. Stay here. Don't leave this cabin. I radioed Andre. I need you to verify something. Go to the brig. Confirm the detainee is still secured. 30 seconds later. Confirmed. Subject still in holding cell. No issues. I looked at the man sitting on the bed in cabin 3042. Stand up. I need to take your fingerprints. He complied, looking worried. I scanned his prints with my portable reader, ran them through our boarding records. Match confirmed. These were the fingerprints on file for Thomas, passenger 287, identical to the prints taken when he boarded in Constanza. Come with me, I said. We're going to the security office. He followed without resistance. In the security office, I had him sit in the interview room while I went to check the holding cell. The man in the red jacket was still there, sitting on the bench, looking dejected. Show me your hands, I ordered. Scanned his fingerprints. Identical, exact same prints as the man in the interview room. Same as the boarding records. Stop and really process what I'm telling you. Two physically identical men, both with the same fingerprints, both with valid documentation proving they were the same person, existing simultaneously on my ship. I brought them face to face, put them in the same room. They looked at each other with identical expressions of confusion and horror. What is this? Red Jacket said. Why does he look exactly like me? Who are you? Gray Shirt demanded. Are you my brother? Some kind of twin I didn't know about? I'm Thomas from Cleveland. I don't have a twin. I'm Thomas from Cleveland. I'm an only child. They both knew the same biographical information, same childhood memories, same college experience, same job history, same friends, same everything. But both claimed the other one was wrong, was fake, couldn't possibly be real. I pulled up boarding records. Security footage from Constanza embarkation. There, at 10:23 a.m. on November 30th, a man matching their appearance boards the ship. Scans his boarding pass. Proceeds to cabin 3042. I scrolled forward. At 11:17 a.m. on November 30th, a man matching their appearance boards the ship. Different clothes. Scans a boarding pass. The system logs him as Thomas, passenger 287, boarding for cabin 3042. 2 boarding times, 2 separate individuals, both logged as the same passenger. This is impossible, Zara whispered, watching the footage with me. The system wouldn't allow duplicate boarding. It would flag and reject the second scan. But it hadn't. Somehow, 2 versions of the same person had boarded, and the system had accepted both. I did background checks, deep background. Thomas from Cleveland, Ohio, 36 years old, software engineer, Booked this cruise 3 months in advance. Standard social media presence. Normal life. Except I found his obituary. Published October 3rd, 2023. Thomas killed in a car accident on October 1st. Funeral held October 7th. Death certificate on file with Ohio State Records. The passenger who'd boarded my ship on November 30th had been dead for 2 months. Both of them. Both versions. Because they were the same person, a person who was supposed to be dead. I confronted them separately. Showed Red Jacket the obituary. According to official records, you died in October. 2 months ago. That's impossible. I'm alive. I'm standing right here. I remember booking this cruise, boarding in Romania, everything since then. Same response from Gray Shirt. Both of them genuinely convinced they were alive, that the death record was a mistake, that they were real. But one of them had stolen jewelry. One of them had committed a crime, which meant one of them was, what? More real? Actually malicious, while the other was innocent? Over the next 24 hours, the situation deteriorated into nightmare territory. Both men became increasingly agitated. Both insisted the other one was fake, was impossible, had to be eliminated. Both claimed they were the original, that the duplicate was somehow stealing their existence. On December 3rd, Gray Shirt attacked Red Jacket in the holding area, tried to strangle him while screaming, "You're not real. You can't be here. I'm the real one." We separated them, kept them in different detention cells. Then on December 4th morning, while we were approaching Sochi, both of them vanished. Not escaped, vanished. I checked the cells personally at 7 a.m. Both men secured. At 7:30 a.m., during shift change, both cells were empty. Locked from the outside. No sign of forced exit. Security footage showed nothing. The cells appeared occupied at 7:28 a.m. and empty at 7:31 a.m. No one entered or left. We searched the entire ship. Every deck, every cabin, every storage area. No trace of either man. Their belongings in cabin 3042 were gone. Their boarding records were corrupted in the system, showing only error codes. The jewelry they'd allegedly stolen had disappeared from evidence storage. Russian authorities boarded in Sochi to take custody of the theft suspect. I had to explain that I'd somehow lost both the suspect and his impossible duplicate, along with all physical evidence. They thought I was lying or incompetent. Honestly, I couldn't blame them. The investigation concluded that I'd experienced some kind of breakdown, that the duplicate passenger was either a delusion or a fraternal twin I'd mistaken for something supernatural. The theft case was closed as unsolved. My record took a permanent hit. But I know what I saw. I have the fingerprint scans, the boarding footage, the security recordings showing 2 identical men existing simultaneously. I kept copies of everything before the official files got corrupted. I resigned from ship security 3 months later, moved back to the States. I don't work law enforcement anymore. Can't. Because how do you enforce laws and procedures based on identity and documentation when you've seen identity itself become meaningless? Sometimes I research multiverse theory, quantum duplication, philosophical questions about what makes someone real, looking for explanations that don't exist. Because Thomas, both versions, shouldn't have been on that ship. The original Thomas died in October, but something boarded in November, wearing his face, carrying his memories, insisting it was alive. And maybe it was. Maybe both were. Maybe death isn't as final as we think, and sometimes people continue existing in ways that violate every logical framework we've built to understand reality. Or maybe I really did have a breakdown, and the duplicate was just a twin. and I'm constructing elaborate supernatural explanations for something perfectly mundane that I misunderstood due to stress and fatigue. But I still have the fingerprint scans. Both sets identical. Both verified against the same boarding records. Two people who were one person who was a dead person who existed anyway. And sometimes, late at night, I wonder, if someone dies but continues existing somewhere, are they dead or alive? If two versions of someone exist simultaneously, which one is real? And if both vanish, did they ever exist at all? I don't have answers. Just questions that destroyed my career and the certainty I used to have that reality follows consistent rules. The ocean is old and deep and strange, and ships sailing it sometimes carry passengers who shouldn't be possible. That's all I know for certain. That, and the fact that I'll never work ship security again. Because I can't trust my own perceptions anymore. Can't trust that the person I'm arresting is actually one person. Can't trust that identity means what I thought it meant. The duplicate passenger taught me that reality is more fragile than we want to believe. And some mysteries don't have solutions. They just have witnesses who get to spend the rest of their lives being called crazy for reporting what they saw. My name is Captain Iowan, and on my retirement cruise from Istanbul to Constanza on February 28, 2025, I discovered my ship was scheduled for one last voyage, with no living passengers aboard. 40 years I gave to the sea. Started as a deckhand at 21, worked every position from engine room to bridge, earned my captain's license at 32. The MV Carpathian Queen had been my command for the last 8 years. She was old, yes. Built in 1994, showing her age in ways that required constant maintenance. But she was mine. And this final 7-day cruise was supposed to be my farewell. 7 days of calm black sea waters, familiar ports, a chance to say goodbye to the life I'd loved. Then I found the documents that revealed my ship's true final destination, and everything I thought I knew about my career turned to ash. It started innocuously enough. We departed Istanbul on schedule, 412 passengers aboard, full crew complement of 156. Standard February cruise. Retirees escaping winter, a few families taking advantage of off-season rates. I did my usual rounds, greeting passengers, checking systems, reviewing reports. Professional routine I'd performed thousands of times. On day 2, March 1st, I was reviewing maintenance logs in my cabin when I noticed a locked drawer in the desk. Standard captain's desk, but this drawer didn't match ship records. I'd captained this vessel for 8 years and never noticed an additional locked compartment. Age making me less observant, perhaps. I used my master key. Locked drawer didn't open. Used my personal override code. Still locked. Something that even the captain couldn't access on his own ship deserved investigation. I had the ship's engineer, a Bulgarian named Georgi, help me bypass the lock. Inside were sealed documents marked Corporate Confidential Disposal Protocol. My name on several pages. My signature forged on authorization forms I'd never seen. The first document detailed the planned scuttling of the Carpathian Queen, scheduled for March 7th, 2025, exactly 5 days from now, at the conclusion of my retirement cruise. Ship to be sunk in international waters, insurance claim filed for mechanical failure, complete loss. Crew to be evacuated. Passengers presumably disembarked before the operation. The second document made my blood freeze. It was a manifest. Not the official passenger manifest I'd reviewed during boarding. This was different. Disposal manifest. Final voyage. It listed 23 names. Beside each name, witness elimination priority. 19 of those names matched passengers currently aboard my ship. The third document was a hit authorization. Subject: Captain Iowan. Method: accidental death during scheduled scuttling operation. Reason: final loose end. Captain has expressed concerns about ship operations. Cannot be trusted to remain silent post-retirement. Read that again and understand what I'm telling you. My own company had planned to murder me along. With 19 passengers as part of disposing evidence of crimes I didn't even know had been committed on my own ship. I confronted Georgie immediately. "Did you know about this?" His expression told me everything. Guilt, fear, resignation. "Captain, I'm sorry. They said if I didn't cooperate, they'd kill my family in Sofia. I have grandchildren. What was I supposed to do?" "What has this ship been used for?" He looked away. "For 3 years, since the new ownership took over. Late-night pickups in remote ports, sealed containers loaded after manifest submission. Bodies, Captain. Trafficking victims who didn't survive, or witnesses who knew too much. We'd take them out to international waters and dispose of them. The entire operation. There are people aboard right now who are supposed to die before we reach Constanza." Everything made sense suddenly. The mysterious maintenance requirements that kept me off the ship during certain port calls. The restricted cargo holds I'd been told contained sensitive corporate materials. The crew rotations that had replaced longtime personnel with people I didn't know well. The gradual isolation of my authority over the past 2 years. My ship, my command, had been turned into a floating execution chamber, and I'd been too focused on routine operations to see it. Who else knows? Which crew members are involved? Maybe 40 crew. Your first officer, definitely. Head of security, several deckhands and engine room staff. They're watching you, Captain, watching all of us. If they think you've discovered the plan, they'll move up the timeline. I made decisions in the next 30 seconds that would determine whether 412 people lived or died. Say nothing. Act normal. I need to identify which passengers are on the disposal list and which crew I can trust. I spent the next 6 hours reviewing every record I could access quietly. Cross-referenced the hidden manifest against official passenger bookings. 19 passengers marked for elimination. Why? I investigated backgrounds. 3 were journalists who'd written about Eastern European trafficking networks. 4 were former employees of the parent company who'd been fired after raising concerns. 2 were lawyers who'd represented victims in trafficking cases. The rest were witnesses to crimes. People who'd seen something, reported something, become liabilities. And scattered among them were innocent passengers, families on vacation, retirees, people who had no idea they were sailing on a ship scheduled to sink with them aboard in 5 days. The company's plan was elegant in its brutality. Stage a catastrophic mechanical failure during a storm, easy to arrange in March Black Sea weather. Evacuate crew via lifeboats. Leave targeted passengers trapped below deck in sealed compartments that would go down with the ship. Blame the captain, dead and unable to defend himself, for negligence that caused the disaster. Collect insurance. Eliminate evidence. Move on. On the evening of March 2nd, I called a private meeting with the 19 marked passengers. Used pretense of a safety briefing for experienced travelers. Got them alone in a conference room. "You're all in danger," I said without preamble. "This ship is scheduled to be deliberately sunk in 5 days. You've been targeted for elimination because of your connections to trafficking investigations or corporate whistleblowing. I need you to trust me and follow my instructions exactly." They thought I was insane at first. Who wouldn't? A ship captain claiming his own vessel is part of a murder conspiracy sounds like paranoid delusion. But I showed them the documents, the manifest, the disposal protocols. Watched belief and terror spread across their faces as they understood. One of the journalists, a Ukrainian woman named Oksana, recovered first. What do? We need evidence that survives, even if we don't. Upload everything to secure servers, send to trusted contacts. But we also need to survive long enough to testify, which means we need to take control of this ship. A lawyer, Romanian like me, shook his head. Captain, if 40 crew members are compromised and actively planning murder, we can't fight them. We're outnumbered and they control all ship systems. Then we change the battlefield. Force early evacuation before they're ready. Get everyone off this ship while we're still close to shore. But here's what made the situation impossible. Forcing evacuation meant signaling distress. The moment I sent a mayday, the compromised crew would know I'd discovered the plan. They'd accelerate the timeline, potentially kill targeted passengers immediately rather than risk witnesses. But not sending distress meant trying to sail a ship where half the crew wanted me dead back to port, giving them 5 more days to eliminate threats. I made the call that destroyed my career but saved lives. On March 3rd, at 0200 hours, I deliberately disabled the main engine cooling system, created an actual mechanical emergency that required immediate attention. As systems began overheating, I sent official distress call to Turkish Coast Guard. MV Carpathian Queen experiencing catastrophic engine failure. Require immediate evacuation assistance. The compromised crew realized what I'd done. My first officer, a Greek man I'd trusted for years, confronted me on the bridge. You've destroyed everything? Do you understand what you've done? Saved 400 lives. Stop this now. Let the Coast Guard evacuate passengers safely. You can still survive this if you cooperate. He pulled a gun. Standard ship's weapon from the security locker. We're too far in. The operation is too big. You think this is just one ship? You've just exposed an organization that spans 12 countries. They'll kill everyone connected to this. Passengers, crew, families. You've murdered us all by making noise. The storm hit while we were arguing. Not scheduled, not planned by anyone. Just terrible March timing. Wind and waves that turned engine failure into actual crisis. The ship began listing as the disabled cooling system led to secondary failures in ballast control. Turkish Coast Guard scrambled helicopters, but weather made approach impossible. We were taking water. The ship was genuinely going down, and now nobody could evacuate. The compromised crew attempted to seal targeted passengers in lower deck compartments. The original plan accelerated by circumstances. I fought them physically. 61 years old, but decades at sea had kept me strong. Freed passengers, armed loyalist crew members, turned the situation into actual mutiny. We fought through flooding corridors while the ship slowly capsized. Not a clean fight. Desperate struggle between people who wanted to survive and people who thought killing witnesses was the only way to survive organizational retaliation. The storm worsened. Ship listed 45 degrees. I made the final captain's decision. Abandon ship completely. Get everyone to lifeboats and life rafts, regardless of who they were or what they'd done. Because my job, my actual job beyond all the corporate corruption, was to save lives at sea. Turkish Coast Guard managed to deploy rescue vessels as weather briefly cleared. We evacuated 398 passengers and 134 crew. 18 people died, 12 crew members involved in the conspiracy who refused evacuation and tried to destroy evidence instead. 6 passengers who got trapped during the fighting. The Carpathian Queen sank at 8:47 on March 4th, taking with her physical evidence of 3 years of murders. But we had the documents. The survivors had testimonies. The bodies they dumped had GPS coordinates and hidden manifests. International investigation followed. Parent company executives arrested in Romania, Greece, and Cyprus. Trafficking network spanning from Syria to Western Europe exposed. 43 crew members across multiple ships charged with murder and conspiracy. I testified for 8 months. Grand juries, criminal trials, civil cases. Relived every moment of discovering that my ship, my command, had been corrupted into something monstrous without my knowledge. The maritime industry treated me as both hero and pariah. Hero for exposing the network. Pariah for losing a ship. For not knowing what was happening on my own vessel. For the 18 deaths during evacuation. My captain's license was suspended pending investigation, then reinstated with formal reprimand for failure to maintain security awareness. I never captained another ship. 61 years old, reputation destroyed, unemployable. I live in Constanza now, small apartment overlooking the port, watching ships come and go. Sometimes families of the saved passengers contact me, thank me, tell me I'm a hero. I appreciate it, but heroism isn't the right word. I was just a captain who finally opened his eyes and saw what his ship had become. Who chose lives over career? Truth over comfortable ignorance. The Carpathian Queen lies at the bottom of the Black Sea now. Divers have recovered some remains, given families closure. The shipping company dissolved. The executives faced decades in prison. The trafficking network fractured. But I know, absolutely know, that other ships still carry similar operations. Other captains choose not to see. Other crews follow orders because families are threatened or money is too good. The sea is vast, and crimes committed in international waters are nearly impossible to police. 40 years I gave to the sea. The sea gave me purpose, adventure, a life I loved. And in the end, it showed me that even the things we love most can be corrupted beyond recognition. That authority without awareness is just a uniform. That the worst betrayals come from systems we've trusted for decades. I'm 71 years old now. Retired for real this time, by force rather than choice. But I'm alive. 398 passengers are alive. And 18 criminals who thought they could murder witnesses and walk away are in prison. That's not the retirement I'd planned. But it's the one I earned. And some nights, when I watch ships leave Constanza Harbor and wonder what cargo they really carry, I think it's the retirement I deserved for being willfully blind for too long. The sea keeps its secrets. But sometimes, captains have to decide whether to keep them too, or burn everything down to save the people in their care. I chose fire. I chose truth. And I'd make the same choice again, even knowing it would cost me everything I'd worked 40 years to build. Thank you for joining me on Mr. Nightveil for these 10 true cruise ship horror stories from the Black Sea. If these stories made you think twice about your next voyage, hit that like button and subscribe for more real accounts from people who survived the unthinkable. Remember, the ocean keeps its secrets, but I share them. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you in the next video.